Chapter 1050. He did not expect recondite iron heavy sword to become Song Hama's famed sword lady. Gahan could not help but laugh. Previously, recondite iron heavy sword was long-used nemesis sword maiden. When Song Hama synchronized recondite iron heavy sword's main body and long you realized that his recondite iron heavy sword had become an artificial sword maiden without a soul, his expression would definitely be very rich. You're actually the Stinky Toad's friend? Enemies are bound to meet. The lady of recondite iron heavy sword said through gritted teeth as she looked at Gahan. It seemed like the lady of recondite iron heavy sword had not forgotten about her crushing defeat at Gahan's hands 3 years ago. Although it was only a consciousness fragment of recondite iron heavy sword that had fought Gahan back then, it was not the recondite iron heavy sword's main consciousness. However, that consciousness fragment had returned to the recondite iron heavy sword's main consciousness. Hence, the recondite iron heavy sword remembered this memory clearly. Even thinking about it now made the lady of recondite iron heavy sword feel very displeased. Guhan smiled faintly, but did not say anything. The recondite iron heavy sword was Song Hama's sword lady. After all, she was already considered one of them, so Gahan could not be bothered to argue with her. However, the recondite iron heavy sword was still unwilling to give up. Back then, you shamelessly learned my consciousness fragment's solitary 9 swords, but times are different now. My consciousness fragment's sword technique isn't even half of my main consciousnesses. Today, I'll show you what the real solitary 9 swords is. How can an ignorant brat like you learn it secretly? You want to fight me? This isn't a suitable place, is it? Gahan frowned. At that moment, the waiter at the tea house brought over a few cups of green tea. A few tea leaves that looked like boats floated on the surface of the green tea. It looked calm and elegant, pleasing to the eye. When the lady of recondite iron heavy swords saw the tea, her eyes suddenly lit up. Why don't we spar with this tea? How do you want to spar? Gahan asked curiously. How about we use the chopsticks as swords and the tea leaves and the tea as targets? The lady of obsidian heavy sword took out 2 chopsticks from the chopstick container and placed one in front of Gahan. Later, I'll shake this cup of tea into the air. Then, both of us will use this chopstick to absorb the tea leaves floating in the air. Let's see who can absorb the most tea leaves in the end. How about that? What kind of damnable method is this? Song Hama, Cast Cloud Steel, and Mountain Suppression Sword exchanged glances. They had never heard of such a way of swordsmanship. Using chopsticks to absorb the tea leaves floating in the air was indeed an unheard of way of fighting, and it could indeed not hurt the friendship between the two sides. It was the best way to compete, but was this really something that humans could do? No problem. Gahan nodded, and it could be considered that he had agreed to the recondite steel heavy sword challenge. Then let's begin. The moment Gahan said that, the lady of obsidian heavy sword immediately slammed the table. There were 6 cups of tea on the table, but only the one closest to the lady of obsidian heavy sword flew into the air. The rest of the tea remained unmoved on the table. Clearly, the lady of obsidian heavy sword's control over her strength had reached an extremely high realm. She could shrink a huge amount of force into a single point. When the teacup was about 1 meter away from the table, it suddenly exploded. The tea and the tea leaves fell down like raindrops. The lady of obsidian heavy sword picked up the chopsticks in her hand and stabbed them at the tea in the air. In the blink of an eye, the chopsticks in the lady of obsidian heavy sword's hand had already absorbed 7 or 8 tea leaves. From this, one could see how fast the lady of obsidian heavy sword's swordsmanship was and how precise her aim was. What surprised the lady of obsidian heavy sword was that the chopsticks in Guhan's hand did not move in the slightest. It was as if he had no intention of competing with the lady of obsidian heavy sword. Is he looking down on me? Is he trying to lose to me on purpose? The lady of obsidian heavy sword was infuriated. She stopped absorbing the tea leaves and used her chopsticks to stab at Gahan's eyes. Sigh. Gahan sighed inwardly. He had indeed planned to lose to the lady of obsidian heavy sword on purpose, so that he could let bygones be bygones and avoid hurting his relationship with Song Hama. However, The lady of obsidian heavy sword was stabbing at his eyes with her chopsticks. If he continued to tolerate it, he would not be Gahan. However, Gahan did not do anything else. He only slammed the table lightly, and the chopsticks that were placed beside his hand instantly flew into the air like springs, blocking the path of the lady of obsidian heavy sword's chopsticks. The two chopsticks instantly collided. The violent collision caused the two chopsticks to lose their momentum and fall to the table at the same time. Enough. Enough. That's it. Obsidian heavy sword, you. Forget it. It's a draw. It's a draw. Song Hama hurriedly said. Song Hama was so anxious that his forehead was covered in sweat. He did not expect his famed sword-rank lady of obsidian heavy sword to attack Guhan with chopsticks. This was no longer within the scope of a spar. It was more like a stab in the back. However, Song Hama was clearly afraid of the lady of obsidian heavy sword. He had wanted to scold the lady of obsidian heavy sword, but he swallowed his words. It seemed that Song Hama did not have any status in front of the lady of obsidian heavy sword. No, I've lost. Song Hama had wanted to let the two of them call it a draw, but he did not expect the lady of obsidian heavy sword to take the initiative to admit defeat with a gloomy expression. This surprised Song Hama greatly. When did this ancestor of his learn to take the initiative to admit defeat? Song Hama immediately looked at the chopsticks on the table and was shocked to find that the lady of obsidian heavy sword's chopsticks, which had 7 or 8 tea leaves stuck to them, now had not a single tea leaf stuck to them. Meanwhile, there were 7 or 8 tea leaves on Guhan's chopsticks. Clearly, these tea leaves came from the lady of obsidian heavy sword's chopsticks. In the instant that the two chopsticks clashed, Guhan's chopsticks had actually snatched away all the tea leaves on the lady of obsidian heavy sword chopsticks. Song Hama was speechless at this. What kind of brilliant swordsmanship was required to achieve this? He did not expect that after not seeing him for 3 years, Guhan's swordsmanship had improved so terrifyingly. It was no wonder that the lady of obsidian heavy sword was willing to admit defeat. Great swordsmanship. I'm afraid that even Monarch Donghua is no match for such swordsmanship. A voice said in a daze. When Gahan raised his head, he found that the voice came from Song Hama's spirit sword, the sword lady. Song Hama quickly introduced, "This is my spirit sword, the sword lady's sky evasion sword." So it's her. Guhan immediately understood. The sky evasion sword was the legendary sword of Monarch Donghua, who was also the leader of the 8 immortals, pure young Taoist Lu Dongbin. It was said that it was a peerless divine weapon refined by fire dragon Taoist. Lu Dongbin was famous for his flying sword technique. He was a top-notch swordsman in history. The sword lady would not lie. Since Lu Dongbin's sword, the sky evasion sword, said that Gahan's swordsmanship had surpassed Lu Dongbin's, then Gahan's swordsmanship must have surpassed Lu Dongbin's. Sky evasion, is what you said true? Has Brother Gahan's swordsmanship really surpassed Monarch Donghua's? Song Hama still asked in disbelief. It's not like Lu Dongbin hasn't fought with Dugat Xiaobai before, but he was still beaten to a pulp by Dugat Xiaobai. I know Lu Dongbin's strength better than Tian Dun. Even 3 Lu Dongbins combined wouldn't be a match for your brother. The lady of black iron heavy sword said impatiently. She clearly didn't think much of Lu Dongbin. Maybe. Gahan smiled. It's useless to talk about it. We'll know after we fight. Song Hama was speechless. Song Hama told Gahan about what happened in the past 2 to 3 years. He felt that the brotherly relationship had become close again. So, Song Hama asked, "Brother, you've stayed in Shanghai Pass for almost 3 years. When will you come out of Shanghai Pass? There's no need for an expert like you to guard that place, right?" "Soon. Just in a few days." Gahan nodded. "I haven't been back to Yuzhong City for 3 years. I miss everything there. It's time for me to go back and see." "That's true. Your disciple has had a hard time in the past 3 years, especially that new chairman of the Sword Council. He treats your disciple like a thorn in his side, a thorn in his flesh. You let your pitiful disciple, a mere ancient sword-rank sword wielder, sit in the position of sword pavilion master for 3 years. If it were me, I would have been driven mad long ago," Song Hama said with a lingering fear in his voice. What did you say? Guhan frowned. You're saying that Lu Shihua is still an ancient sword-tier swordsman? Yes. Why didn't you know? Song Hama was stunned. Shihua clearly told me that she had already become a treasure sword-tier sword wielder 2 years ago. Last year, she became a famed sword-tier sword wielder. Soon, she would be able to synchronize with the spirit sword-tier sword maiden. I always thought that these 3 years were very smooth for her. Guhan cried out. That's impossible. She's still an ancient sword wielder, trustworthy. Song Hama said angrily. You don't know how much the new chairman of the Sword Council and those old guys are going overboard. They said that since Lu Shihua took over the position of Sword Pavilion Master, she should do everything herself and be perfect. Therefore, they forced Lu Shihua to do everything by himself. They even made Lu Shihua do some things when he was free. As a result, Lu Shihua could only stay in the Sword Pavilion for the past 3 years. He couldn't even go out of the Sword Pavilion, let alone go out of the city to fight with Yuan Ko. If she didn't fight Yuan Ko, where would she get the sword essence? Without the sword essence, how could Lu Shihua increase her level? Song Hama sighed. What's worse is that those people keep saying that Lu Shihua is a lazy glutton, that he has no talent, and that he doesn't have the ability to become a sword-level sword wielder. He only knows how to hide in the sword garret and enjoy his life. Yuzhong City is full of complaints about Lu Shihua, and the sword garret is also in chaos. Your disciple is only in her early 20s, but now she looks like a woman in her 30s. How pitiful. Shihua. Gahan couldn't help clenching his fists. In the past 3 years, Gahan had talked to Lu Shihua several times. Every time, Lu Shihua told Gahan that he was fine and that everything was fine in Yuzhong City. Moreover, Gahan had been immersed in fighting and perfecting his swordsmanship. After hearing Lu Shihua say that Yuzhong City was fine, Gahan didn't pay much attention to Yuzhong City. Therefore, he didn't hear anything about Lu Shihua in the past 3 years. This made Gahan feel deeply guilty. He had arranged for Lu Shihua to be the Sword Pavilion Master in Yuzhong City, but he hadn't considered the future. He didn't expect that he would enter Shanhai Pass so soon. Lu Shihua, a young ancient sword wielder without any background, had to endure the schemes of countless old foxes for 3 years. One could imagine what kind of pain and torture Lu Shihua had gone through in the past 3 years. Some people need to pay the price. Gahan picked up the cup of tea in front of him and drank it in one gulp. Back then, he wasn't strong enough and could only use various means to barely deal with the attacks of those old foxes. But now it was different. It seemed that Gahan needed to make some bastards pay the price. Chapter 10:51. It seems like I've stayed here for too long. After leaving the game, Gahan sighed. He did not expect that his carefree life over the past few years had caused Lu Shihua's life to be so bitter. However, this kind of life was finally coming to an end. After another day, Gahan would have spent 3 years in Shanhai Pass. Finally, it was time for Gahan to leave Shanhai Pass. However, this night did not seem to be peaceful. The moonlight in the sky trembled slightly. With a thought, Gahan suddenly tapped the void on his left. The entire space trembled, and a figure fell out of the void. Chang'e, it's actually you. When Gahan saw the person he had knocked out of the void, he could not help but be surprised. This person was actually the last great witch, Chang'e, whom the humans had been searching for 2.5 years in Shanhai Pass to no avail. Are you here to ambush me? Gahan looked at Chang'e with interest. I didn't expect to have such a life before I left. It can be said that I've completely resolved a problem for the humans. After saying that, 3-foot-long sword Qi appeared on Gahan's finger. What was noteworthy was that Gahan was not holding any sword mothers in his hand. Gahan was relying on his own body to release the 3-foot-long sword Qi. Everyone knew that if a swordsman wanted to release sword Qi, he had to have a sword mother in his hand. Sword Qi. Sword Qi. How could there be Qi without a sword? However, at this moment, Gahan could release sword Qi out of thin air. Perhaps only the sword masters knew how terrifying this was. Wait, Chang, he hurriedly said. I'm not here to kill you. I was already in your room when you were playing the game. If I wanted to kill you, wouldn't it have been better to do it then? You wouldn't have been able to kill me then. Gohan said disdainfully, if you dare to come within 5 meters of me, I can kill you even in the game. Gohan's words made Chang-E gulp involuntarily. She did want to get closer to Gohan, but once she was within 5 meters of him, she felt a chill run down her spine. It was as if she would be killed if she took another step forward. Therefore, Chang-E wisely decided to give up and waited for Gohan to come out of the game from afar. She didn't expect that this action would actually save her life. Speak. Why are you looking for me? You're not really here to die, are you? Gohan said as he looked at Chang-E's ugly face, which looked as if it had been splashed with acid. Do you think I'm ugly? Perhaps sensing the disdain in Gohan's eyes, Chang-E's emotions were suddenly stirred, and her voice suddenly became high-pitched. Coupled with her ugly appearance, it was like the howling of a demon. Do you know? Am I the most beautiful woman in the world? I know. Gohan nodded. Your Chang-E sword has told our media more than once that you are indeed beautiful. Is that so? Does anyone still remember my beauty? Chang-E suddenly fell silent, but then her face was filled with resentment. Do you know why I, the most beautiful woman in the world, became like this? What do you want from me? Gohan frowned. He had no interest in listening to Chang-E's story. I don't want anything. You don't have anything on you that I want. Chang-E smiled strangely, then took out a wooden box made of unknown materials. She opened the wooden box, and a drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence was shockingly placed inside. This drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence is for you. Chang-E directly placed the box in front of Gohan. As long as Zheng doesn't get this drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence, then he can forget about becoming Zhu Wu for the rest of his life. What are you scheming? Looking at the drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence, Gohan's expression became increasingly unfriendly. I hate men like you the most. All of you are scheming and plotting. Chang-E looked at Gohan with disdain. I'll tell you the truth. This drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence is the key to resurrecting the 12 Zhu Wus in the future. I'm giving this drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence to you so that the 12 Zhu Wus can be resurrected. I've already told you my scheme. How you deal with it is up to you. After saying this, Chang-E did something that caused Gohan to turn pale with fright. That was, her body actually began to dissolve. In the blink of an eye, this Grand Witch Chang-E had turned into a drop of blood floating on the floor. This drop of blood was exactly the same as the other Grand Witches. Clearly, Chang-E had committed suicide. Gohan looked indifferently at the drop of blood on the floor and the drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence on the table. The last Wu people who had escaped the net, Grand Witch Chang-E, had actually appeared in front of him of her own accord. Then, she handed over the last drop of the Wu people's blood essence to him. In the end, she had directly committed suicide, not giving Gohan any chance to ask any questions. She had even blatantly told Gohan that this drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence was the key to resurrecting Zhu Wu. Only God would know what kind of scheme Chang-E was secretly plotting. However, no matter what, how to deal with this drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence had become a rather troublesome matter. Since Chang-E had said that this drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence was the key to resurrecting Zhu Wu, if he allowed it to remain in Shanghai Pass, it might cause trouble for his successor. After all, there are currently less than 1,000 swordsmen in Shanghai Pass. These 1,000 swordsmen could not control the situation at all. If something went wrong, the Zhoutian Star Battle formation might really collapse. If he brought this drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence with him, Gohan would always feel that he had fallen into the Wu people's trap. The Wu people wanted him to bring this drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence with him. Actually, the best way was to find a way to destroy this drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence. However, the level of Zhu Wu's blood essence was too high. It was the level of an Emperor sword wielder. Currently, Gohan was only a famed sword wielder. There was no way he could destroy this drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence. All of a sudden, Gohan fell into a deadlock in order to deal with this drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence. At that moment, A little fellow barged into Gahan's room without knocking. He hugged a pillow and shouted, "Gohan, Doyu is so naughty. You put your foot in his mouth. Can Qingpin sleep with you today?" Looking at the sleepy Qingpin, Gahan did not know what to say. If Qingpin slept with him, he would not have to worry about Doyu putting his foot in his mouth. However, he would have to worry about Qingpin putting his foot in his mouth. Oh no! Suddenly, Gohan thought of something. He immediately put the drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence into his dimensional pocket. However, he was still one step too late. Cut! Qingpin suddenly spat out a word that Gahan had not heard for more than 2 years. Then, the wooden box in Gahan's hand disappeared into thin air. In the next second, the wooden box appeared in Qingpin's hand. At that moment, Qingpin's height was pulled up to the height of a young girl. "It's you." Gahan touched his head with a headache. He did not expect that young girl Qingpin, one of Gahan's biggest headaches, would jump out again. "Damn it, you actually hid so many things from me." As soon as young girl Qingpin appeared, she had a somewhat ferocious expression. However, this ferocious expression was not directed at Gahan, but at herself. "I was wondering why I did not absorb any of the Wu people's blood essence after such a long time. It turns out that you were lying to me. You actually dared to block your own memory. If I did not suddenly jump out after smelling Zhu Wu's blood essence today, I would not have known that you actually hid so many things from me in the past 3 years." Young girl Qingpin flew into a rage. "Today, I will clean up the house and erase your traitorous thoughts." "Stop." At that moment, no matter how stupid Gahan was, he understood what young girl Qingpin meant. At first, Gahan was a little puzzled as to why young girl Qingpin had never come out to cause trouble for him in the past 3 years when he had not used Qingpin's sword to kill a single Wu people. It turned out that the lowly Qingpin had blocked his memory, so the sleeping young girl Qingpin did not know what had happened outside. However, today he had brought out the last drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence, and the lowly Qingpin had coincidentally barged into his room. The power of Zhu Wu's blood essence had directly awakened young girl Qingpin, which was why the scene before Gahan's eyes had happened. At that moment, young girl Qingpin was furious at the lowly Qingpin's concealment. She was actually prepared to directly wipe out the lowly Qingpin's consciousness. How could Gahan allow young girl Qingpin's plan to succeed? He left and shouted loudly, "Three-edged treasured sword, Qingpin! Qingpin's sword, if you dare to touch my Qingpin, I can cut off the sword mark between us and then throw you into the dimensional whirlpool so that you can forget about returning to this world for the rest of your life. I mean what I say." "Are you threatening me?" Young girl Qingpin. "Oh no, let's call her Qingpin now." Although Qingpin sounded extremely angry, she could not help but lower her raised hand. Clearly, Gahan's threat had worked. Qingpin was indeed afraid that Gahan would cut off her sword mark and throw her into the dimensional whirlpool. "It's fine if I don't wipe out this traitorous fellow. I want her to see with her own eyes how you die in her own hands." Qingpin sneered. Then, she ate the last drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence in the box. After a series of changes, she turned back into the lowly Qingpin. "Gahan." Qingpin looked at Gahan with teary eyes. After hesitating for a while, she said in a trembling voice, "Gohan, hurry up and cut off Qingpin's sword mark." Qingpin does not want to see Gahan die with her own eyes. Qingpin does not want to die in Gahan's hands. "All right, it's fine. Everything will be fine. Don't think about these messy things." Gohan hugged Qingpin tightly in his arms and comforted her gently. Gohan knew very well that if he broke off the sword mark between him and Qingpin, then Qingpin, the main consciousness, would definitely erase Qingpin, the subconsciousness, and he would kill this poor fellow. "Don't worry, Qingpin. Gohan will definitely let you live a happy life." Gohan kissed Qingpin's face hard. Then his mind began to move quickly. Looks like it's time to give Qingpin a new body, just like Qi Dian. Gahan thought to himself. This was also the best solution Gahan could think of. It was to let Qingpin's soul completely break away from Qingpin's control. Let her grow into an independent personality, an independent sword mistress, just like King Yu. Chapter 1052. Gahan did not sleep well for the entire night. He was thinking about how to save Qingpin from Qingping's clutches. With Qi Dian as an example, Gahan did not think that it would be difficult to create a new body for Qingpin. The real difficulty was how to separate Qingpin's soul from Qingpin's sword, and then find a place for Qingpin's soul to reside temporarily. It was conceivable that when he decided to separate Qingpin's soul, Qingping would try her best to stop him. If he was not careful, Qingpin might be erased by Qingping. Therefore, Gahan had to be very careful. Before he found a way to separate Qingpin's soul safely, Gahan could not act rashly, let alone alert the enemy. Therefore, maintaining the status quo was the best solution. By the time Gahan had a rough idea of what was going on, the entire world had turned bright. It was already the morning of the second day, and it was also Gahan's last day in Shanhai Pass. 3 days ago, Gahan had already informed all the other sword-bearers to come to Taiyin Garrison for a meeting. He would hold a succession ceremony and hand over the position of the Guardian of Taiyin to the next Guardian. Therefore, Gahan arrived at the meeting room of Taiyin Star Garrison early in the morning. However, when Gahan arrived at the Sun Moon Star Guardian conference room half an hour before the scheduled time, there were only less than 1/10 of the famous sword-bearers in the entire conference room. When they saw Gahan, these sword-bearers did not show much respect. They did not even nod to greet him, as if he was just an irrelevant passerby. This was completely different from when Gahan had just arrived at the Sun Moon Star Guardian Palace 3 years ago. At that time, as the Guardian of Taiyin, Yao Wang's power was astonishing. No one dared to stand up to Yao Wang, and even dare to show such disrespect to Yao Wang. However, the attitude of the sword-bearers now was like heaven and earth. Why would such a situation occur? Gahan was very clear in his heart. Ever since the shamans were chased deep into the mountains and forests, Mountain Sea Pass no longer needed to choose top-notch genius sword-bearers to guard the place. The Mountain Sea Pass Management Committee's attitude in choosing the Guardians had changed to throwing the weakest sword-bearers with famed swords who could not improve, who were just sitting around waiting for death, because Mountain Sea Pass had already turned from a dangerous place where the death rate was as high as 40% to a holiday spot where the death rate was less than 3%. The Mountain Sea Pass Management Committee only used the ranks of these sword-bearers to maintain the existence of the Heavenly Cycle Star Formation. They did not need these sword-bearers to fight. When Shanhai Pass had to fight constantly, powerful strength would become the guarantee of prestige. Only when you had powerful strength would those sword-bearers be willing to fight with you, because they believed that you could protect them. Therefore, those sword-bearers who had fought alongside Gahan for 1.5 years were very respectful towards Gahan, because they knew very well how terrifying and powerful Gahan's strength was. However, those sword-bearers who had not seen Gahan's strength before were useless sword-bearers. Their purpose of living in Shanhai Pass was to wait to die. Many of them had not even seen the face of Wu people, so they did not know how terrifying Gahan's strength was. In the propaganda of the Sword Committee, all the credit was given to Ing Zheng and Lian Ling, and Gahan was just a sword-bearer who was occasionally mentioned. He was lucky enough to become brothers with Lian Ling and Ing Zheng, so he got some credit. Besides, because there was no need to fight, the title of Sun Yin Guard was more of an empty title. At the same time, it was only to maintain the existence of the Zhou Tian Star Battle Formation. They were all sword-bearers with famous sword-bearers, so why should they show respect to him? On top of that, Gahan had completely hidden behind the scenes for the next 1.5 years. So the people of Taiyin Garrison had forgotten about the existence of this Sun Yin Guard. In conclusion, it was reasonable for these new sword-bearers to have a disdainful attitude towards Gahan. When the appointed time arrived, only less than 1/5 of the sword-bearers with famous sword-bearers had come to the meeting room. Gahan knew that even if he waited any longer, these sword-bearers would not come. Well, it did not matter whether they came or not. As long as the successor of Taiyin Garrison was here, he could just hand over the Sun Yin Star Zhou Tian Star's Hour banner to him, and his mission would be completed. Wan Shida, the heavy responsibility of Taiyin Garrison will be handed over to you, said a rather young sword-bearer sitting beside him. The reason why Gahan handed the position of Sun Guard to him was very simple. It was because he was the youngest among all the sword bearers present. At the same time, he was also the new sh*T Star Guardian. Since the position of Sun Guard had become insignificant, Gahan willfully gave it to his successor in Shi Sing Garrison. "Thank you, Sir Gahan." Wanshida excitedly pulled out his sh*T Star Great Zhou Tian Star's Hour banner and placed it on the table. At the same time, he held the new Sun Star Great Zhou Tian Star's Hour banner in his hand, ready to take over the position of Sun Star Guardian. After all, this was the position of Sun Star's Guardian. Although this position was more of a symbolic thing after the Shanghai Pass Administrative Committee was reorganized and didn't have any actual power, it still sounded better than the title of sh*T Star Guardian. No one expected that in the future, the position of Sun Star Guardian would be handed over to the sh*T Star Guardian. The Shi Sing Garrison also leapt from being the worst garrison in Taiying Garrison to becoming the crown prince of Taiying Garrison. All the Sun Star Guardians would be taken over by the sh*T Star Guardian. Gahan couldn't be bothered to hold a succession ceremony. He directly pulled out his great Zhou Tian Star's Hour banner from his purple palace. Just as he was about to break it, something happened. A series of people suddenly walked in from the open door of the conference room. These people were almost all ordinary people, but they were all wearing the Shanghai Pass Administrative Committee's uniform. The person in the lead was a sword bearer with a famous sword with the sign, Shanghai Pass Administrative Committee Executive Director. "Wait, we can't hold a handover ceremony," the Shanghai Pass Administrative Committee Executive Director shouted. The sudden turn of events jolted the absent-minded sword bearers out of their stupor. They realized that the boring matter had become interesting and immediately began to pay attention to what was about to happen next with great interest. "What's wrong? Why can't I hold a handover ceremony?" Guhan frowned as he looked at the Shanghai Pass Administrative Committee Executive Director. The Shanghai Pass Management Committee and the Sword Committee have issued a joint order. Considering that famed sword-level sword wielder Comrade Guhan has been meticulous in his work during his time as the Guardian of the Moonstar, his style of work is rigorous. He has managed the Moon Guard Mansion in an orderly manner, and he has completed the task given to him by the Sword Committee. At the same time, in order to ensure the stability of the Zhou Tian Star battle formation, we have decided to let Comrade Gahan continue to be the Sun Star Guardian and build the Taiying Star Garrison to a better place. Speaking up to this point, the Shanghai Pass Administrative Committee Executive Director gave a very annoying smile. "Comrade Gahan, congratulations! The Sword Committee and the people are very satisfied with your work. No one is willing to let you go. In that case, I have to thank the Sword Committee for their trust in me." Guhan's tone sounded very calm, but even a fool could tell that there was a storm in it. "Of course, you can continue to live a carefree life in the Shanghai Pass. This is of course a good thing. It is also a sign of the Sword Committee's trust in you. Times are different now. There are countless sword bearers who want to enter Shanghai Pass, but the Sword Committee does not approve them." This was true. Shanghai Pass was indeed a place that everyone yearned for. "How long do I have to stay here?" Gahan asked again. "At least for another 3 years," the executive director said with a smile. "If you think it's not enough, another 6 or 9 years is not out of the question. This is Ying Zheng's idea? Or is it the idea of those bastards in Yuzhong City? Or is it the idea of the Lunyan family?" Gahan asked out of the blue. "How would I know who you've offended?" The executive director blurted out the truth in a moment of confusion. Shanghai Pass was the best place for those sword bearers who wanted to retire. There was no danger here, and they could earn a very generous salary. There was no better place in the world to retire than here. However, for those sword bearers who were determined to improve themselves, this place was a dead end. The shaman tribe would not provide sword essence to the sword bearers. Forget about staying for 3 years. Even if the sword bearers stayed here for 30 years, they would not be able to increase their sword essence. This place was equivalent to a place that would forever seal the sword bearers and prevent them from increasing their sword essence. No sword bearer with any fighting spirit would be willing to stay in Mountain Sea Pass. Therefore, when Gahan heard that the Sword Committee had ordered him to stay in Shanghai Pass for another 3 years, Gahan could not suppress his anger. Back then, when Lin Yanling, Ku Rakin, and Leslie Dracula were all transferred away, but Gahan was not. Gahan had already guessed that someone was deliberately trying to suppress him in Shanghai Pass. However, at that time, Gahan wanted to heal the internal injuries in his body and at the same time to better understand his swordsmanship, so he did not resist. However, he did not expect the mastermind to be so shameless. They actually wanted to suppress him for another 3 years. Guhan could say without a doubt that if he really stayed in Shanghai Pass for another 3 years, he would still be forced to stay there for another 3 years. These people wanted to use Shanghai Pass as a cage, trapping him in Shanghai Pass forever. Guhan said coldly, since the establishment of Shanghai Pass, there has never been a case where sword-bearers are required to stay in Shanghai Pass after 3 years. Every sword-bearer only needs to stay in Shanghai Pass for 3 years. This is written in the rules of Shanghai Pass. Did the Sword Committee forget about this? The rules can be changed, the executive director said impatiently. I forgot to tell you that the rules have been changed. Now, as long as the Sword Committee feels that it is necessary, they can request sword-bearers to stay in Shanghai Pass. Therefore, the rule of having to leave after 3 years is no longer effective. You have to stay in Shanghai Pass. If you don't want to be the guardian of the lunar star, you can be the guardian of the SH*T star. Anyway, you will be leaving from here. What if I refuse? Guhan suppressed his anger. Then I'm sorry. There is no shortage of positions in the prison of the disciplinary committee. The executive director scolded in disdain. In his eyes, would any sword-bearer dare to resist the authority of the disciplinary committee? Chapter 1053. I can't be bothered to waste my time with you. Without another word, Guhan snapped the Sun Zhou Tian Star banner in his hand and swaggered towards the door of the meeting room. He couldn't be bothered with the executive director of the Shanghai Pass Administrative Committee anymore. Gu, how dare you? The executive director of the Shanghai Pass Administrative Committee took out his sword lady and was about to release it to attack Gahan. However, he held the sword lady in his hand for a long time, but it didn't move at all. It seemed like it had no intention of releasing it. Young man, this is Shanghai Pass. Without the great Zhou Tian Star banner, you are just an ordinary person. Don't count on your sword lady. A white-haired famed sword-rank swordsman sitting beside the executive director said calmly. The executive director suddenly remembered that he couldn't use the star power in the great Zhou Tian Star banner without the help of the Zhou Tian Star banner. Moreover, the sword essence in his body was completely suppressed by the great Zhou Tian Star battle formation. Therefore, it was impossible for him to release his sword lady. The executive director wasn't completely blind or deaf. He had vaguely heard some of his friends talking about Gahan. He knew that Gahan was a swordmaster. Without the help of the sword lady, he was afraid that he wouldn't be a match for Gahan. You guys, hurry up and capture him. Therefore, the executive director immediately ordered the few famed sword-rank swordsmen sitting beside him. These famed sword-rank swordsmen were the guardians of the Zhou Tian Star battle formation. They could use the power of their sword lady. Now that Gahan had lost his great Zhou Tian Star banner, he was no match for these guardians. Therefore, the executive director immediately ordered them. Unexpectedly, these famed sword-rank swordsmen rolled their eyes and pretended that they didn't hear the executive director's words. They continued to sit quietly in their chairs with their eyes closed. What are you doing? Seeing Guhan's figure gradually disappear from his sight, the executive director became anxious and shouted that Guhan openly disobeyed the order of the Sword Committee. We must arrest him and bring him to the Discipline Commission for discipline inspection and let the law judge him. The headquarters of the Sword Committee gave you an order, but not us. The white-haired famed swordsman sneered. How about this? Let's get an order from the Sword Council first. Then we'll go and capture him. You. The executive director was infuriated by the swordsman. Putting aside the fact that he did not have the ability to get an order from the Sword Commission, even if he did, He was afraid that Gahan would have left Shanghai Pass by then. Young man, don't blame us for not helping you. This time, the Sword Committee has really gone too far. He's a young expert, different from us retired people. You guys actually trapped him here for another 3 years. Do you guys still have any humanity left? What's more, trapping a potential famed swordsman like this, what are your Sword Committee's intentions? Could it be that the core purpose of the Sword Committee is not to protect and help every swordsman to grow? Could it be that the Sword Committee has become a place where people fight for power and profit, where they will do anything to harm their enemies? This old man feels that the smell of the Sword Committee has become more and more strange in the past 2 years. It's really unlucky. An even older, famed sword-level sword-bearer could not help but speak up. This sword-bearer's words could be said to have pierced through the heart. He spoke the truth, and it also caused the executive director's face to turn pale. All right, old Sue, these young people do not listen to us old people. Another old swordsman waved his hand and said to the executive director, you definitely can't command us. If you want to capture him, then you have to do it yourself. Do you see the Big Zhou Tian Star Time banner on the table? As long as you integrate it into your purple palace, you will be able to regain control of the Sword Lady. What you want to do is up to you. We won't accompany you. After saying that, these old swordsmen left the conference room, including Wanshida. After hesitating for a while, he also left the conference room, leaving only the executive director and the Big Zhou Tian Star Time banner on the table. I'm just temporary. Once I capture that Gahan, I'll be free. What's the big deal? Thinking so, the executive director directly inserted the great heavenly cycle star banner into his Zifu. After waiting for a minute or two, his eyes suddenly emitted a bright light, and he once again pulled out his sword Maiden, successfully releasing her from the Zifu. Whirling light sword, let's go. With his sword lady by his side, the executive director immediately chased after the direction that Gahan had left. When Gahan finished packing his things and came out of the room, he saw the executive director blocking his way. Beside him, there was a dull and lifeless sword lady. Obviously, this sword lady was not a natural sword lady, but a man-made one. Gahan, it's too late for you to regret now. I'm going to escort you to the Discipline Commission for discipline inspection and let the law judge you. The executive director said righteously. With just you, Gahan coldly snorted. Let those old farts from Yuzhong City come here, or letting Zheng come here himself. As for you, you're still too inexperienced. Arrogant. Continue to be arrogant. The executive director also sneered. You may be really strong, but that was when you were the Lunar Guardian. You really shouldn't have broken the Big Zhou Tian Star Time banner of the Lunar Star. Right now, you are just an ordinary person. I really don't know where you get the courage to be so arrogant. Light Whirlwind, hurry up and capture him. It doesn't matter if he gets injured, just don't kill him. The executive director's sword lady, Light Whirlwind, listened to its sword wielder's order and immediately slashed at Gahan's arm without saying a word. According to the executive director's plan, Gahan could no longer use his sword essence, so he could not form a close-fitting shield around his body. This way, Light Whirlwind could easily attack Gahan's arm. As long as it crippled one of Gahan's arms, Gahan would realize how stupid he was. Unfortunately, the following development was completely out of the executive director's expectations. The executive director clearly saw Light Whirlwind's sword about to cut Gahan's arm, but his vision suddenly blurred. Before he could see clearly what had happened, the sword in Light Whirlwind's hand had already left Light Whirlwind's hand and was instead held in Gahan's hand. My sword. Although Light Whirlwind did not have high intelligence and did not have much spirituality, its most important sword had been snatched away. Light Whirlwind's face revealed an expression of disbelief. Just like her sword wielder, she had no idea what had just happened. Her sword had already been snatched away by Gahan. The Sword Lady's sword is used to deal with enemies, not our own people. Gahan looked at the Light Whirlwind in his hand with a gloomy expression, then said to the executive director, "How dare you use your sword against me? Since when did the Sword Commission headquarters authorize sword wielder to use their swords against their own comrades?" You violated the Sword Commission headquarters orders and openly resisted arrest. Can I arrest you? The executive director said matter-of-factly. Have you memorized the sword wielder management regulations and sword wielder criminal procedures? Unless the sword wielder has committed an extremely vile crime of killing humans or harming comrades. Only then will the relevant personnel be able to arrest and control the sword wielder without the disciplinary committee's approval. Guhan said coldly. Other than that, you must have an arrest warrant from the disciplinary committee before you have the right to make a move against me. Have you forgotten all these rules? Don't try to escape punishment. The executive director immediately replied, Of course I remember these rules. However, when I came out, the higher-ups specifically told me that if anyone dares to refuse the Sword Commission headquarters orders, then this person will be considered to have committed an extremely vile crime. They can arrest the person immediately without asking for permission. Guhan, you'd better surrender now, lest your crimes become even more serious. Idiot, you don't even know that you've been used as a weapon. Guhan casually tossed out the light rotation sword. The executive director only felt a cold wind blow past his crotch before the light rotation sword was tossed out from between his legs by Guhan. It stabbed deep into the ground, leaving only the sword hilt exposed. At that moment, the executive director's little brother suddenly felt a cool breeze blowing on his body. He immediately lowered his head and realized that his pants and underwear had been sliced apart by the sword. It was as if the executive director was wearing a pair of open crotch pants. It was no wonder the cool breeze was blowing on his little brother's body. If this sword had moved a little higher, it would have. The executive director suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. If the solid cold had moved a little higher, his little brother would have been in danger. What terrifying swordsmanship! The executive director recalled how Feng Xinjian had easily snatched the light rotation sword from Empress Light Rotation's hands. He also understood that the difference between them was no longer just 1 or 2 levels. It was like the difference between heaven and earth. This Guhan is actually so powerful. The executive director remained rooted to the spot, muttering to himself in confusion. This powerful sword wielder. What kind of mistake did the Sword Committee headquarters make? Why did they insist on keeping him in Shanghai Pass? Was it really as those old fogies said? Was someone trying to ruin his life? If such a powerful sword wielder was allowed to continue growing, he would definitely become a mainstay of humanity in the future. He might even become a spirit sword or immortal sword wielder. Could it be that the Sword Committee headquarters has really changed? They're willing to destroy the interests of all humanity for the sake of a few? That's right. That old fogey was right. The Sword Committee headquarters doesn't feel like the Sword Committee headquarters of the past anymore. The Sword Committee headquarters of the past would definitely not do something like this. The executive director, who had been so aggressive just a moment ago, immediately became dispirited. Be careful. The executive director suddenly thought of something and immediately shouted to Guhan, I didn't come alone. There's probably someone waiting for you outside. You must be careful. Got it. Thank you, comrade. Guhan waved his hand from afar, then directly boarded his droplet flying car and headed towards the Shanghai Pass's city gates. The best way to deal with an enemy was not to defeat them, but to make them submit to you wholeheartedly. Chapter 1054. 10 minutes later, Guhan arrived at the gate tower of Shanghai Pass at full speed in the droplet flying car. 3 years ago, Guhan had entered Shanghai Pass through this gate tower. 3 years later, he would leave Shanghai Pass through this gate tower as well. According to the standard procedure, Guhan should go through the gate tower to leave Shanghai Pass before leaving Shanghai Pass. However, after what had just happened, Guhan could not be bothered to go through the proper procedures. He directly leaped onto the walls of the Shanghai Pass, and with another jump, he successfully left the heavenly cycle star formation that had trapped him for 3 years. The moment Guhan came into contact with the outside air, the sword essences that he could not sense previously returned to his control. However, the sword essences did not recover immediately. Instead, they recovered slowly like an hourglass. This was the side effect of staying in Shanghai Pass for 3 years. Although Gahan could use his sword essences during his 3 years in Shanghai Pass, he could only use the Great Zhou Tian Star flag to convert the sword essences in his body into the power of the stars. Then, he could use the power of the stars to fight. Therefore, this was only an indirect way of using the sword essences. In fact, Guhan had not been able to control the real sword essences for 3 years. Therefore, the sword essences could not return to Guhan's control immediately. He had to gradually regain control over them through a gradual process. Guhan roughly estimated that he could regain control of about 10 quarks of sword essences per second, which was 600 quarks per minute and 36,000 quarks per hour. It would take about 13 hours for all the 460,000 quarks of sword essences in Guhan's body to be completely recovered. This was nothing for most sword bearers. They only needed to wait for 13 hours. They would slowly recover the sword essences in their bodies under the protection of the Shanghai Pass Management Committee. However, Guhan did not seem to receive such good treatment. When Guhan jumped off the wall of Shanghai Pass, he saw an old friend floating in the air looking at him. Sword Spirit of Guay Hall. Long time no see. The person hovering in the air waiting for him was none other than the Sword Spirit of Guay Hall who had sent Guhan to Shanghai Pass 3 years ago. After not seeing him for 3 years, the Sword Spirit's aura had become even gloomier, and his strength had naturally increased as well. According to Guhan's observations, this Sword Spirit's sword essence should have broken through 1,000,000 quarks, reaching the minimum standard of a celestial sword wielder. As long as he found a celestial sword wielder who was willing to synchronize with him, the Sword Spirit would probably become a celestial sword wielder in one leap. Long time no see. There were no stairs under the Sword Spirit's feet. However, the Sword Spirit still walked down from the sky as if he was walking down a flight of stairs. Finally, he stood firmly on the ground. What's wrong? Are you here to welcome me? Guhan asked the Sword Spirit with a smile. Can I? The Sword Spirit waved his hand, and a table and 2 chairs were placed on the ground in front of Shanghai Pass. There was also a bottle of wine with a blurred label on the table. It's a Beijing Erguo 2 produced on the 23rd of March, 2017. You have no idea how much effort it took me to get this wine. Are you interested in having a few drinks with me? The Sword Spirit of Guay Hall asked Guhan with interest. A fine wine from 1,000 years ago. Guhan looked carefully at the bottle of Erguo 2, whose label could no longer be seen. I heard that this Erguo 2 is worth 100,000 yuan just by smelling it, and 70 million yuan just by drinking it. Are you really willing to let me drink such a fine wine? Whether it's a good wine or not has nothing to do with the wine itself, but the person drinking it, the Sword Spirit said coldly. The Sword Spirit of Guay Hall said coldly. Even some sword immortals don't cooperate with my Erguo 2. However, I'm worried that it's not good enough for you, Guhan. Interesting. Guhan smiled and sat down on his seat. He deftly twisted off the cap of the precious 1,000-year-old Erguo 2 and poured himself a full cup. He placed it in front of his nose and sniffed it. He exclaimed, "This is really good wine. I feel refreshed just by smelling it." Of course. The Sword Spirit smiled and filled his glass as well. He then raised his glass to Guhan and said, "Brother Guhan, a toast to you." "Sure." Guhan clinked his glass with the Sword Spirit and drank the wine in one gulp. "Great wine. I've never tasted such fine wine before." Guhan couldn't help but exclaim, "Brother Guadian, I have a favor to ask. I have a sword mistress who loves wine. I wonder if I could ask her to come out and have a taste of this wine." "Brother Guhan, you must be talking about Lady E." The Sword Spirit nodded. Lady E is extremely righteous, and she was Kenzu's sword mistress back then. How could I not agree? Thanks a lot then. Guhan thanked him and released Heavenly Sword right away. The moment Tian was released, it sniffed with its delicate nose and immediately discovered the fragrance of wine in the air. Its eyes immediately lit up as it stared at the bottle of Erguo 2 in front of it. Without saying a word, it hid the bottle in its arms and looked at Guhan and the Sword Spirit cautiously. This bottle of wine is mine. None of you are allowed to snatch it from me. Brother Gui Dian, please forgive Etion. She gets carried away whenever she sees wine. Please be understanding, Guhan said with a smile. It's fine. Before the sword spirit could finish his sentence, Etion raised the bottle and poured the erguo into her stomach. In the blink of an eye, 1/3 of the erguo was gone. Ever since I left Jation, I don't know how many years it's been since I've tasted such pure erguo. It must be the erguo produced by the old factory. Only the old factory's wine cellar can produce such a taste. Etion praised. Guhan had never seen Etion praise a bottle of wine like that. Lady Etion, don't be in such a hurry. Drink slowly. Even the sword spirit of the sea hall could not help but twitch when he saw the fine wine he had kept for a long time being drunk by a single person. He looked pained. Etion probably felt that it was too wasteful to drink like that. So she snatched the glass in front of Guhan and carefully poured half a glass of erguo. She first brought it to her nose and sniffed it with all her might. After fully experiencing the fragrance of the erguo, she sipped it mouthful by mouthful. It was a stark contrast to how she had gulped it down like a wolf. For Etion to drink so carefully, this bottle of wine of yours must be one of the best in the world, Guhan said as he rubbed his nose. Guhan said as he touched his nose, I appreciate the kindness of this bottle of wine. Tell me, Brother Ming, why did you come all the way here to greet me and spend such an expensive bottle of wine on me? Brother Ming, what are you here for? Our relationship isn't that good, is it? You must be joking, Brother Guhan. The relationship between people is always unpredictable. 1 second, you're an enemy. The next, you'll become a friend for life and death. The same is true, the sword spirit said. The sword spirit of Gui Hall said in a deep voice, whether Brother Guhan and I are enemies or friends depends on your decision. Oh, I wonder what's wrong with this momentary lapse in judgment? Guhan asked back with interest. Brother Guhan, if you return to Shanghai Pass for another 3 years, we'll be best friends in the world. Otherwise, the two of us will be enemies, the sword spirit said calmly. I see. Guhan smiled in disdain. I thought you were different from the others. I didn't expect you to be in cahoots with them. Don't forget that you sent me to Shanghai Pass 3 years ago. I've been here for 3 years. What else do you want? You can stay for another 3 years. Didn't I stay in there for 6 years to achieve what I have today? The sword spirit of Gui Palace played with the wine glass in his hand. Let's go back. 3 years is enough. I promise that no one will stop you from coming out after 3 years. How about this? Are you representing yourself? Or do you represent your father? Guhan did not answer the sword spirit's question directly. Instead, he asked a different question. What do I mean? What do you mean, my father? The sword spirit asked. Didn't you say that enemies and friends are separated by a single thought? Guhan chuckled. If that's what your father wants, then I've made a great opponent. If that's what you want, then I'm sorry, but you're not worthy to be my opponent, Guhan. You? The sword spirit was so agitated by Guhan's words that he could not help but jump. How arrogant! There's no opponent in this world that I, the sword spirit, can't be. It's not that I'm looking down on you, but the fact that you're waiting for me here means that you know you're not my opponent. Guhan looked at the sword lady's great xia dragonfinch in the sword spirit's hand and said, If you think you're qualified to be my opponent, drink with me for an hour. After an hour, I'll admit that you're qualified to be my opponent. Hee, as expected of Guhan and the military governor. I'm speechless. The sword spirit let out a long sigh. Others might not know your abilities, but I know them very well. You're right, I'm not your opponent when you're at your peak, and I can't give you an hour to recover your sword essence. Today, let me, your unworthy enemy, send you back. After saying that, the sword spirit tossed the sword lady aqua dragon sparrow into the air. Then, the sword lady aqua dragon sparrow landed heavily on the ground, causing a huge tremor. I won't bully you. As long as you're capable of defeating the great xia dragonfinch, I won't meddle in this anymore. The sword spirit took a step back and left the battlefield to the great xia dragonfinch. Etion, it's time to end our feud. The great Xia dragonfinch slammed the giant sword in her hand onto the ground, causing a violent shockwave that shattered the entire table. Fortunately, Guhan's eyes and hands were sharp, and he managed to grab that precious bottle of Erguo Tu into his hands. "Give me the wine." The Etion was completely focused on the Erguo Tu and did not care about the great Xia dragonfinch at the side. "What's the hurry? I won't snatch the wine from you." Guhan pouted at the great Xia dragonfinch. "Let's defeat your old enemy first. I can't wait to have sex with you." Chapter 1055. Etion frowned and said to the water dragon Sparrow, "Sparrow, you know better than me what happened back then. I didn't do anything. It was all that guy's wishful thinking. Why do you have to vent your anger on me and keep pestering me?" "If it wasn't for you, how could Yijichio not like me? How could he not marry for his entire life and not even touch a single woman? It's all because of you, bitch," the deep water dragon Sparrow said angrily. There was important information in her words. After Guhan had become the Sword Pavilion Master, he had specially looked through the records of the Sword Pavilion. He discovered that the second sword bearer of the Heavenly Sword, which was also the previous sword bearer, came from a sword bearer from 300 years ago called Yijichio. In the end, this sword bearer became a spirit sword bearer. However, he died at an early age, dying before the age of 50. Otherwise, this Yijichio could very well have become an immortal sword bearer. The deep water dragon Sparrow happened to be Yijichio's sword mistress. With this information, Guhan could easily guess what had happened back then. Yijichio had fallen in love with Etion, but Etion did not like Yijichio. On the contrary, Yijichio's sword mistress, the deep water dragon Sparrow, had fallen in love with Yijichio. However, it seemed that Yijichio was deeply in love with Etion. When he could not get Etion's love, he chose not to marry or touch any woman. That was why the deep water dragon Sparrow hated Etion so much. However, according to some of the other records that Guhan had discovered, Yijichio seemed to have completely fallen out with Etion at the final juncture of his life. For a whole 5 years, he had sealed Etion in his scabbard, not releasing it even once. As for what exactly happened, no one knew. While Guhan was curious about the gossip, the battle on the other side had already begun. "Today I will break every bone in your body. I will destroy all your pride and self-esteem." After saying that, the deep water dragon Sparrow dashed towards Etion with a giant sword in her hand. "After so many years, your swordsmanship is still so smelly. You haven't improved at all." Etion shook his head in disdain as he watched the deep water dragon Sparrow's attack. Clearly, he was not impressed by the deep water dragon Sparrow's swordsmanship. "I only need to flick you lightly, and you'll be sent flying," Etion said indifferently. Then, he gently flicked the heavenly sword towards a certain point on the deep water dragon Sparrow's sword. Ironically, the one who flew out in the end was not someone else, but Etion himself. Etion's entire body flew out and crashed heavily into a large tree, breaking the entire tree. From this, one could see just how powerful the deep water dragon Sparrow's sword was. Keep pretending. If you, Etion, have the ability to act tough again. Seeing Etion fly out, the deep water dragon Sparrow immediately felt proud and provoked Etion proudly. "Guhan, where's your sword essence? Why is your sword essence so little? Why did I use up all of it just by using a bit of strength?" Etion, whose bones were numb from the impact, questioned Guhan angrily. "There's nothing I can do about that." Guhan shrugged. "Etion, you've seen it for yourself. Someone shamelessly fought with me a few minutes after I left Shanghai Pass. I only have less than 2,000 quarks of sword essence in my body now. I've already given you all of these 2,000 quarks of sword essence just now. I don't have any more left. Then how much more sword essence do you have for me to use?" Etion immediately asked in shock. "From now on, I can only provide you with 10 quarks of sword essence at most every second. You'd better make good use of it and not waste it," Guhan said with a chuckle. "Are you kidding me? 10 quarks of sword essence every second? Even if I'm an Emperor Sword Lady, I can't beat that be *tch Sparrow head." Etion looked like she could not accept this. Why don't I do it? Guhan said calmly. But if that's the case, you have to give me half of this ergo too. Dream on. Etion stomped her feet in anger. Watch closely. I'll use my true strength to deal with this sparrowhead. After saying that, Etion flew out from the broken bushes and took the initiative to fight with the water-sunken dragon sparrow. However, the heavenly sword's actions were like throwing an egg at a rock. In just a few seconds, the heavenly sword was once again sent flying by the water dragon sparrow. This time, the heavenly sword directly crashed into the city wall of Shanghai Pass, causing the entire wall to shake. Etion, looks like your new master is too useless. He can't even provide you with a little bit of sword essence, making you so fragile. Why don't I send you back to the furnace to be reforged? The sunken dragon sparrow laughed maniacally and charged towards Etion on the wall like a missile. Sparrowhead, I've always looked down on humans, but I have to say this. Gahan isn't someone AB*TCH like you can bully. Etion's eye kicked hard on the city wall and flew in another direction, narrowly dodging the attack of the deep-water dragon sparrow. You can't escape. The sunken dragon sparrow immediately chased after Etion. After fighting for a while in the air, Etion was sent flying by the sunken dragon sparrow for the third time. 3 times, 5 times, 20 times, 50 times. The following battles were just like the previous ones. Although Etion was still fearlessly fighting with the sunken dragon sparrow, she would be sent flying by the sunken dragon sparrow in less than 10 seconds. She was completely beaten up by the sunken dragon sparrow. Hence, the aqua dragon sparrow was extremely excited. It was not that she had never fought with Heaven Sword before, but because they were both sword bearers, and a sword bearer could only provide sword essences to a sword lady in a liberated state. They could not use sword essences during the battle, and could only use swordsmanship. This was naturally a piece of cake for the Heavenly Sword, which was known as the best swordsman and one of the top 3 famous swords. Every time the sunken dragon sparrow was humiliated by Etion's swordsmanship. Of course, in Etion's eyes, this was a form of education. Therefore, at this moment, when the sunken dragon sparrow kept sending Etion flying, the feeling of humiliation that had been suppressed in her heart for a long time was completely released. What replaced it was a strong sense of pleasure from revenge. The sunken dragon sparrow's brain was so dazed that she did not notice that the truth might not be as beautiful as what she saw. Compared to the dazed sunken dragon sparrow, her sword holder, the sword spirit of Ming Palace, was much calmer. He soon discovered that although the sunken dragon sparrow was at an absolute advantage, Etion was not seriously injured. The energy of the sunken dragon sparrow's shield was always within the 60% safety line, while the energy of the sunken dragon sparrow's shield was decreasing at a slow and even rate. It would soon fall below the 60% safety line. Why is this happening? The sword spirit of Ming Palace was deeply confused. The sunken dragon sparrow was clearly suppressing Etion, and Etion was also the one being sent flying and smashing into various things. If he was in Etion's place, and he was only given 10 quarks of sword essence per second to use, the sword spirit of Ming Palace would have no doubt that his shield would be broken by the sunken dragon sparrow within 2 strikes, and he would become a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. No, there's a problem here. I can't let the sunken dragon sparrow continue playing around. I have to make her use her ultimate move. The sword spirit of Ming Palace immediately ordered the sunken dragon sparrow to use her ultimate move, Wall of Unity. Back then, the creator of the sunken dragon sparrow, Helion Bobo, had decided to build the strongest city in the world, which was the Wall of Unity. Therefore, King Helion Bobo recruited 100,000 people to build the Wall of Unity, and each craftsman was responsible for a section of the wall. After the wall was built, the craftsman would hit it with a sharp awl. If the awl penetrated an inch deep into the wall, the entire family of the craftsmen would be beheaded. Therefore, every craftsman in the construction of the Wall of Unity did not dare to slack off at all. After killing tens of thousands of craftsmen and their families, the Wall of Unity was finally built. The Wall of Unity became the strongest city in Huaxia after it was built. The Wall of Unity. The unique skill of the Deepwater Dragon Sparrow came from this. When the Deepwater Dragon Sparrow used the Wall of Unity, a circular city wall would appear and trap the enemy inside. Whether the enemy could fly or travel through the void, the enemy would be firmly trapped inside before the Wall of Unity was broken. Therefore, the Wall of Myriad Unity also had another name, which was Sword Immortal's Worry. This meant that even an immortal sword maiden would feel worried when she saw the Wall of Myriad Unity, because she could not escape through the void within the Wall of Myriad Unity. More importantly, when a sunken dragon sparrow was inside the Wall of Unity, the Wall of Unity could increase the sunken dragon sparrow's attack power by 50%, making the already extraordinary sunken dragon sparrow's attack even more terrifying. Whatever you say, although the sunken dragon sparrow wanted to continue enjoying the pleasure of knocking the heaven sword away, the sword spirit of the Gue Palace had issued an order. The sunken dragon sparrow had no choice but to listen to the sword spirit of the Gue Palace and use its ultimate move, the Wall of Unity. Heaven's sword. Yi Jiqiu protected you in the past, but he is no longer here to protect you now. Die! The sunken dragon sparrow shouted. A circle with a radius of around 1 kilometer suddenly rose from the flat ground, surrounding the heaven sword and the sunken dragon sparrow. Sparrowhead, you're actually using the wall of 10,000 now? This isn't like you at all. The heaven sword knew its old opponent like the back of its hand. Of course, it knew how bad the situation would be after the Wall of Unity appeared. Cut the crap. The sunken dragon sparrow did not waste any more time. She directly rammed into the heaven sword and sent it flying again. However, this time, the sunken dragon sparrow did not let the heaven sword fly away. Instead, it flew along with the heaven sword. It wanted to give the heaven sword a final blow the moment the heaven sword crashed into the wall. The situation seemed quite dangerous. The heaven sword was in great danger. Chapter 1056. The Deepwater Dragon Sparrow eventually hit the wall of all things that he had set up. However, the Deepwater Dragon Sparrow realized that something was wrong. He seemed to have hit the wall, and Etion, whom he had used as a cushion, was nowhere to be seen. Hey, I told you 350 years ago that you can't fight recklessly like this. I told you to learn more sword skills, but you refused. Why bother? A mocking voice came from behind the Deepwater Dragon Sparrow. She turned around and saw Etion standing behind her with a smile. When did you run away? The Deepwater Dragon Sparrow asked in shock. She had clearly placed Etion in front of her just now. How did Etion appear behind her in the blink of an eye? It's just a shadow shifting technique. It can't be used in a big fight, but it's enough to deal with a rude little sparrow like you. Etion said with a mocking smile. You? The Deepwater Dragon Sparrow was instantly enraged. She picked up her giant sword and was ready to attack Etion again. Sparrow Brain, you'd better look at your own personal shield. Do you really think you have the upper hand? Etion said sarcastically. Only then did the Deepwater Dragon Sparrow notice the strength of its shield. It was horrified to find that its shield strength was less than 30%. How did this happen? The Deepwater Dragon Sparrow could not believe her eyes. She had no idea how her personal shield had been reduced to less than 30%. However, her opponent, Etion, who did not even have 10,000 sword elements, still had about 50% of her personal shield strength. All the damage in the wall of everything ignores the source and target. In other words, your own attacks can also cause great damage to yourself. You must have been hurt badly when you hit the wall just now, right? Do all the bones in your body hurt badly? Etion's words were like a sharp knife stabbing into the Deepwater Dragon Sparrow's heart. The Deepwater Dragon Sparrow, who was feeling very satisfied just now, was instantly filled with shame and anger. She roared and continued to attack Etion like a madman. Sigh, after fighting for so long, I've finally saved up some green plum wine. Etion sighed and drank all the green plum wine in the gourd in one gulp. He summoned his claw, Huang Feidian, and transformed into his dazzling divine general form. Sparrowhead, You just let me have a taste of your ultimate move. Now it's time for me to let you have a taste of my ultimate move. Etion, who was in the state of a mortal general, let out a playful laugh. In the blink of an eye, he had engaged in a fierce battle with the deep-water dragon Sparrow. However, this time, Etion was not sent flying. Instead, he was in a stalemate with the deep-water dragon Sparrow. To put it nicely, the moves of the deep-water dragon Sparrow were grand and magnificent. To put it bluntly, it was a simple move that relied purely on one's immense strength to attack. There was no technique to speak of. On the other hand, Etion's swordsmanship was the other extreme. He displayed his swordsmanship to the extreme. The sky was filled with Etion's swordlight. The deep-water dragon Sparrow would often have to use its shield to take dozens of attacks from Etion when it tried to block one sword strike. Although the sword spirit of Gue Palace could block the attacks with a massive amount of sword essence, all of Etion's attacks in the state of a mortal general ignored defense. Therefore, the strength of the deep-water dragon Sparrow's shield was declining rapidly. On the other hand, Etion's shield was not damaged at all. This meant that the deep-water dragon Sparrow had not attacked Etion at all. It's time to end this. It's slower than I expected. Gohan watched the battle with a slightly disappointed expression. On the other side, the sword spirit of Gue Palace looked terrible, as if his mother had just died. Oh no! The sword spirit of Gue Palace's expression stiffened. He already knew that his deep-water dragon Sparrow was likely to lose. Boom! The wall of Thousand Worlds suddenly made a loud noise. Just as abruptly as it had appeared, it disappeared just as abruptly, leaving behind a pile of debris on the ground and a cloud of dust that covered the entire battlefield. You've lost. After the dust settled, the outcome of the battle had already been determined. Just as Gohan and the sword spirit of Gue Palace had predicted, the deep-water dragon Sparrow's shield had already been destroyed. Etion's heavenly sword was already on the deep-water dragon Sparrow's neck. The outcome of the battle was obvious. I've lost. The deep-water dragon Sparrow dropped the giant sword in her hand helplessly. Right now, she was filled with a sense of defeat. She had the advantage of more than 1,000,000 sword essences, yet she had still lost to her old enemy. This was a blow that she could not accept. You've changed. You've become stronger than before. The deep-water dragon Sparrow calmed down and began to recall the battle. She recalled how she had lost. From the beginning of the battle, she had completely suppressed Etion. Etion had been sent flying by her over and over again, and she had thought that victory was in her grasp. However, after thinking about it carefully, she realized that although Etion had indeed been sent flying, it seemed more like she had done it on purpose. She had been sent flying to nullify her powerful attack, then diverted it to the trees, the walls, and the soil. In any case, she had diverted the attack to something else. She did not receive any actual damage, which was why Etion's shield did not suffer too much damage even after such a violent attack. On the contrary, Etion kept swinging her heavenly sword at herself as she was sent flying again and again. The sword spirit did not care about these attacks at all because of her rich sword essences and did not notice that her shield was actually weakening at an extremely fast rate. In that final clash, Etion, who was in her divine general state, had used her swordsmanship to its limit. In front of her swordsmanship, the water-sink dragon Sparrow's swordsmanship was as childish and laughable as a baby's. All it could do was punch its opponent's chest with its little fists while the opponent was pointing a machine gun at its temple. After understanding this, the deep-water dragon Sparrow felt even more hopeless. The swordsmanship that Etion had displayed just now was something that the deep-water dragon Sparrow had never seen before 350 years ago. Although Etion's swordsmanship from 350 years ago was also terrifyingly powerful, it was still within the deep-water dragon Sparrow's understanding. The deep-water dragon Sparrow could still understand Etion's swordsmanship. Simply put, Etion and the deep-water dragon Sparrow were still in the same category. The difference between them was like the difference between an emperor and a beggar. But now, the difference between them was like the difference between a beggar and the Jade Emperor. The difference had exceeded the limits of humans. One was in the sky, while the other was on the ground. Etion's improvement over the past 350 years was terrifying, but the deep-water dragon sparrow was still at the same place, dreaming of revenge. It was just too ridiculous. Your swordsmanship is probably much more terrifying than recondite Iron Heavy Sword's swordsmanship now. What exactly have you been through over the past 350 years? Have you been practicing your swordsmanship for the past 350 years? After experiencing the huge difference between them, the deep-water dragon sparrow suddenly realized that her hatred for Etion had lessened. No, since you've been paying so much attention to me, don't you know that I've been sleeping in the sword tower for the past 350 years? Etion yawned. Then how did you practice your swordsmanship? How did you become so terrifying in just 3 years? The deep-water dragon sparrow asked in confusion. It hasn't been 3 years. It's only been 1.5 years. Etion looked at Gahan as she spoke to this point. She looked at the smiling man and said in a bitter yet sweet tone, "If you've been trained by that guy for 1.5 years, I guarantee that you'll be much more powerful than I was 350 years ago. That guy with recondite Iron Heavy Sword will no longer be the best swordsmanship on the famous sword level." It turned out that Gohan had not been idle during the 1.5 years he had been recuperating. He had spent most of his time training his sword ladies. However, the effect of training varied from person to person. Among them, Etienne was the sword lady who had improved the fastest. After all, Etienne had the highest talent in swordsmanship. She had even learned most of the chaos sword technique that Gahan had created. Next were Juzi and Doyu. Both of them were sword ladies who were talented and willing to work hard, so their improvement was obvious. Next would be Qi Dian and Shi Shui. These two belonged to the category of sword maidens who had terrible talent in swordsmanship, but were willing to endure hardships. Shi Shui had to be praised here. As a sword maiden who had transformed from a human, her swordsmanship foundation was basically zero, but now she could be compared to Qi Dian. As for the worst one, of course, it was the poor sword. She almost angered Guhan to death. Although she was talented, she was lazy and greedy to the extreme. She had so many ways to slack off that even Guhan felt dizzy. She was the sword maiden that Guhan spent the most time and effort on, but the results were the worst. I can't believe you would show such an expression for a man. Looking at Etion's sweet expression, the deep-water dragon sparrow suddenly felt that some things were so ridiculous. I thought you would never fall in love with any man. If Yijichio saw this, he would definitely die of anger. If he dies, then he dies. Who cares about him? Etion shrugged and put away the heavenly sword that was on the deep-water dragon sparrow's neck. Why? Don't you want to break all my bones? The deep-water dragon sparrow asked guiltily as she recalled her bold words. Why would I break your bones? I'm only interested in wine. I'm not interested in your bones. Etion walked back to Gahan lazily. She stuck out her tongue and said, "Where's my precious Erguo-tu? Give it to me. Sai, I want to have a sip too." The deep-water dragon sparrow shook her head bitterly. She turned into a ray of sword light and returned to the sword spirit's scabbard. She was too ashamed to come out and could only numb herself with wine. Hee. I didn't expect Lady Etion's swordsmanship to have improved to such an extraordinary level. I'll leave you alone, Brother Gahan. The sword spirit smiled bitterly and cupped his fists at Gahan. He was about to leave. Wait, Guhan said slowly as he placed the Erguo-tu in Etion's hands. Did I say you could leave? Do those idiots really think that I, Gahan, am a nice person that they can do whatever they want without getting angry at? Sword spirit of the Gue Palace, can I borrow your clothes? Chapter 1057. Dear viewers, you are now watching the Yin Jing Feng Yin TV station's exclusive live broadcast, Exploring the Ruins. A super team of 6 famed swordsmen will explore the cities that have been reduced to ruins. While fighting against Yuan Ko, they will discover a huge secret that has been hidden for thousands of years. Today, the team has arrived at the ruins of Qin Huangdao City. Although this place is very close to Shanhai Pass and is often raided by swordsmen, there are not many Yuan Ko hiding in the ruins of Qin Huangdao City. However, it is still a place full of danger. Grand Shaman Qin Huang once said in our program that Qin Huangdao City was named after him, and it was a name that he liked very much. 3,000 years ago, his favorite thing to do was to stand by the seaside of Qin Huangdao City and look at the setting sun in the sky. I believe that in the near future, all of you will be able to see the beautiful setting sun through our cameras. However, I don't know if the setting sun now will be any different from the setting sun from 3,000 years ago. A host held a microphone and talked nonstop to a fully automatic flying camera. Beside the host were 6 swordsmen who were vigilantly observing their surroundings, on guard against Yuan Ko, who could appear at any time. This was a special live broadcast program produced by Yanjing's largest television station, Yanjing Feng Yun TV station. They sent reporters to follow the swordsmen into the dangerous ruins of the city. Although their gimmick was to explore the secrets under the ruins of the city, they were actually live broadcasting the fierce battle between the swordsmen and Yuan Ko. This program was deeply loved by the masses. Although they could usually see how the swordsmen and Yuan Ko fought through movies and videos, those were after all edited and recorded, and they already knew the outcome. The audience preferred to watch this kind of battle that they didn't know the outcome of. This kind of live broadcast is undoubtedly a very risky way of broadcasting. This is completely different from the reality shows we see now. Although reality shows look quite dangerous, they have all kinds of safety measures. The celebrities who participate in reality shows can't really be in danger. However, this live broadcast program called Exploring the Ruins did not have any safety measures. Yuan Ko didn't care whether the reporters were innocent or not. In the 50 years since this program had been broadcast, more than 10 reporters had died in Yuan Ko's hands. More than 100 people had died in the 6 swordsman team organized by the television station. Therefore, such a program needed to be produced with great strength. Even the war reporters themselves needed to be at least a sword-bearer. Otherwise, they would not be able to stay on the battlefield for more than a few days before dying tragically in the hands of Yuan Ko. Because the production cost of this program was so high and the content was so thrilling and exciting, the ratings were very high. For example, the current live broadcast of Exploring Qin Huangdao City had more than 1 million viewers watching this live broadcast. Be careful. While the host was talking nonstop, a swordsman who was in charge of guarding in the distance suddenly shouted. Everyone immediately became very nervous. Even the host immediately shut his mouth and controlled the automatic camera to record the surroundings. At this moment, the audience also held their breath, waiting for Yuan Ko to suddenly jump out. Everyone, pay attention to the sky in the distance. There seems to be a white Yuan Ko there. Suddenly, a white shadow appeared in the sky in the distance. The host immediately said to the audience nervously, but soon they found that it was a false alarm. When the white figure revealed its true face, people found that it was a silver-white artificial object. It was a levitating vehicle shaped like a water droplet. On both sides of the levitating vehicle, there was the logo of Yuzhong City. It turned out that this was a levitating vehicle from Yuzhong City. It was a human, not the dangerous Yuan Ko. Everyone, be careful. Who knows, this levitating vehicle might be Yuan Ko in disguise. The leader of the 6 swordsmen said cautiously, then immediately used his personal terminal to send an identification signal to the levitating vehicle. If the levitating vehicle was really a human levitating vehicle, then it would definitely give the team a unique feedback signal. Beep! The personal terminal made a crisp sound, and everyone let out a sigh of relief. This sound meant that the personal terminal had received a feedback signal. The levitating vehicle was indeed a human levitating vehicle. What a pity! I thought I could see the battle with Yuan Ko. Many of the audience said with pity, but there were also many who were very interested in the appearance of the levitating vehicle. This was the first time they had seen a levitating vehicle shaped like a water droplet. This levitating vehicle looked very cool. They didn't know which company produced it, and what was the contact number to order it. Hello, comrades from Yuzhong City. We are swordsmen from Yanjing City. Why don't we meet up? The team leader immediately used his personal terminal to send an invitation to the levitating vehicle. 4 swordsman bearers to meet in the wild at the last minute. It was normal for both sides to get together and chat. After all, in this desolate wasteland, it was not easy to meet a comrade. It was natural for everyone to get together and chat. It was not that the team had not met other swordsman bearers before. Every time they sent out an invitation, the other party would show up. Then, the audience would get to see some other swordsman bearers. Occasionally, they would see a team of more than 10 swordsman bearers fighting together. You are from Jing City. Soon, the team leader's personal terminal received a reply from the levitating vehicle. It was a young male voice. That's right. Let's get together. Let's have a chat, the team leader invited. However, this Yuzhong City swordsman did not care about the team leader's invitation. Instead, he said playfully, "Since you are from Jing City, then I'll give this London guy to you." What the hell is this? Hearing this answer, the team leader, the host, and the audience in front of the TV were all confused. What did this answer mean? What did he mean by, "Since you are from Jing City, then I'll give this London guy to you"? Was there any connection between Jing people and London people? Just when everyone was puzzled, the levitating vehicle flew above the team in the blink of an eye. Then, the top of the vehicle was opened, and a white object was pushed out from the levitating vehicle. These swordsman bearers thought that the levitating vehicle had dropped a bomb from the sky. They immediately jumped to the side in panic. At this moment, the team was near the ruins of a house in Qinhuangdao City. The ground was covered with sharp concrete ruins, as well as rusted steel bars. The shiny white thing that was thrown out from the hovercraft crashed into the ruins, raising a cloud of dust into the air. After the levitating vehicle dropped the person, it immediately headed towards Yuzhong City. It did not even stop for a second. What is this? Is it a bomb? The host nervously guessed while covering his mouth. When the dust gradually dispersed, the thing that was pushed out from the levitating vehicle was reflected in the eyes of the host and the audience. The thing that was pushed out was actually a naked, white body. Ah, it's actually a man. The male audience in front of the TV were excited when they saw the white body. But when they saw the gender of the body, they immediately cursed. Who the hell wants to see a man's body? Can't you change it to a woman's? Oh my God. Mosaic. Quickly put on a mosaic. After the host saw the situation clearly, he immediately said to the automatic camera beside him. This fully automatic camera from the future was also very considerate to add automatic mosaic technology. After a few seconds, the white body was automatically mosaic with even more white. Only the head was displayed in the image. F***CK. It's fine if a woman is mosaic, but you're a man. Why are you mosaic? The audience was even angrier and cursed. The other sword bearers quickly rushed up and helped the naked man up. In the end, they found that the man's body was not light. A steel bar had even pierced the man's waist. They did not know if it had pierced his kidney or not. At the same time, the man's hands were tightly bound by a talisman seal. Obviously, this man was a sword bearer, and the other sword bearer was the one who did it. Otherwise, he would not have been sealed with a talisman seal that only humans had. Comrade, what's wrong with you? Who is so cruel? How could they abuse and humiliate you like this? The leader of the sword bearers could also see that the person who made the sword bearer stay did not have any killing intent. He just wanted to humiliate the man. Otherwise, he would not deliberately throw the man in front of him. That person only needed to find a random place to throw the man down, and the man with the talisman seal would definitely die in the hands of the other Yuan Ko. Therefore, the other party deliberately threw the man in front of him so that he could save the man and prevent him from dying in the hands of Yuan Ko. That's right, this is too much. How can he humiliate people like this? Another sword bearer said indignantly. As if he had discovered a new continent, the host began to analyze the grudge between the two sides to the audience in front of the TV. Why would the owner of the hovercraft humiliate the man like this? Even the audience in front of the TV quickly forgot about the mosaic's dissatisfaction. In fact, everyone's heart was full of gossip. When such an extremely gossipy plot appeared in front of everyone, they could not help but start to gossip about the grudge between the two sides. Wait, Don't you think this man looks familiar? Another sword-bearer in the team suddenly patted his head and said, after hearing the sword-bearer's words, he immediately felt that the naked man looked very familiar, as if he had seen him somewhere before. I remember now. The host was so excited that he could not even hold the microphone steadily. Isn't this the sword spirit of Gue Palace? Oh, this was big news. Chapter 1058. It's the sword spirit of Gue Palace. F*CK. It's really the sword spirit of Gue Palace. Then, the host mentioned the name of the sword spirit of Gue Palace. The rest of the sword-bearers reacted one after another. Who else could this naked person be other than the sword spirit of Gue Palace? Because the number of spiritual sword-level sword-bearers was very small, every sword-bearer received a lot of attention. Most of the sword-bearers could recognize some spiritual sword-level sword-bearers. Moreover, the sword spirit of Gue Palace was a notorious spiritual sword-level sword-bearer who used to be a big shot in the Shanghai Pass Management Committee. It could be said that the sword spirit of Gue Palace was the nightmare of every famous sword-level sword-bearer. What they were most afraid of was being recorded in the Black Notebook by the sword spirit of Gue Palace and becoming a glorious member of the Shanghai Pass. A year and a half ago, the Wu people were mostly wiped out by Grand Shamanqin Huang. The Shanghai Pass had changed from an extremely dangerous place to a retirement place for famous sword-level sword-bearers. The sword spirit of Gue Palace had also lost his greatest deterrent. However, the shadow of the sword spirit of Gue Palace still existed in the hearts of every famous sword-level sword-bearer. The face of the sword spirit of Gue Palace could be said to be the most memorable face of a spiritual sword-level sword-bearer. It was just that they couldn't imagine that the powerful sword spirit of Gue Palace would be stripped naked and thrown down. The name of the sword spirit of Gue Palace had never popped up in their minds. Therefore, they felt that the person in front of them was very familiar, but they still couldn't recognize him. In fact, some of the sword-bearers present had recognized the sword spirit of Gue Palace from the beginning. However, after recognizing the sword spirit of Gue Palace, they kept their mouths shut for fear of revealing his true identity. Although the sword spirit of the Gue Palace was no longer a threat, the problem was that the sword spirit of the Gue Palace was the son of the Dragon Lion Sword Emperor. Now that he was stripped naked and thrown down, if such a shameful thing were to be exposed in the live broadcast, one could imagine how miserable the person who revealed the sword spirit of the Gue Palace would be. Only the host, who didn't fear the sword spirit of Gue Palace that much and didn't know that the sword spirit of Gue Palace was the son of Long Shi Jiandi, called out the name of the sword spirit of Gue Palace without any hesitation. At this moment, all the other sword-bearers revealed a look of sudden realization, as if they had just discovered it themselves. The sword-bearers had a look of realization on their faces, but the viewers who were watching the live stream exploded. Many people who knew about the sword spirit's background were so shocked that they fell off their chairs. What kind of joke was this? The son of the dignified Shanghai Pass Management Committee, Long Shi Jiandi, was actually stripped naked and thrown down from the sky. He even deliberately threw it into a live TV program so that millions of viewers could see this shameful scene at the same time. It could be imagined that after this TV program was broadcast, even if the TV station immediately banned it, the impact of this matter would inevitably spread through the internet. In less than a day, everyone would know that the son of the dignified Long Shi Jiandi had been stripped naked and his sword essence had been sealed with a talisman. This was a complete and utter defeat. Hurry up and bring me new clothes and brand new underwear. After the captain confirmed that this naked person was the sword spirit of Gue Palace, he immediately shouted to his teammates, "Oh, oh." The team members hurriedly rummaged through their dimensional pockets, trying to find a new set of clothes. In the end, they discovered that although there were a lot of new clothes in their dimensional pockets, there was no brand new underwear at all. They only had underwear that they had worn once or twice. If the sword spirit of Gue Palace knew about this, wouldn't he hate them to death? I say, you guys, The team leader stomped his feet angrily when his team member couldn't find any clothes for him. He took out a new towel from his dimensional pocket and wrapped it around the sword spirit's body temporarily to avoid exposing himself. However, when the sword spirit appeared in front of the camera in a towel, he looked like a prostitute that the police had caught from a hotel when they were cracking down on pornography and illegal publications. Sealed talisman. Which one of you knows how to remove the talisman? Hurry up and help the sword spirit of Gue Palace remove this talisman. The captain said to his teammates after wrapping the sword spirit in a bath towel. Captain, it's not like you don't know. It's not that easy to remove the talisman. If you don't know what the other party is using to remove the talisman, not only will you not be able to remove the talisman, but you may also cause unavoidable and permanent damage to the sword spirit of Gue Palace. Only professionals can remove it. A team member replied softly. He was telling the truth. Depending on a method used to seal the talisman, the method to remove the seal was also different. If one randomly removed the talisman without knowing the other party's method, there was a 90% chance that not only would the talisman not be able to remove the talisman, but it would also cause permanent damage to the other party. Therefore, the best solution was to escort the sword spirit of Gue Palace back to Yanjing City and ask professionals there to analyze the sealing method of the talisman. Then, the professionals would remove the talisman. It was better for the sword bearers to not act rashly. Otherwise, the sword spirit of Gue Palace and Longshire Jindi would bear a deep grudge against them. No, just use the simplest method to remove the talisman. The sword spirit of Gue Palace, who had been silent all this while, suddenly said his first words after seeing the sword bearers. Although the talisman could seal the sword bearers' sword essence, it couldn't seal their mouths. While the captain was fiddling with the sword spirit of Gue Palace, the sword spirit of Gue Palace kept his mouth shut the entire time. His expression was as dull as a rock, and he didn't stop the captain's actions. He just let the captain do as he pleased, as if he had lost his mind. Only when the other sword bearers expressed that they wanted to send the sword spirit of Gue Palace back to Yanjing City to remove the seal did the sword spirit of Gue Palace finally speak. The current situation had already tortured the sword spirit of Gue Palace. If he was sent to Yanjing City to be studied again, it would be no different from torturing the sword spirit of Gue Palace again. Can we just use the simplest method? The captain couldn't help but confirm again. The so-called simplest method was to directly send his sword essence into the talisman and remove the seal. However, the premise was that the person who sealed the talisman didn't use any special sealing method. Otherwise, sending his sword essence into the talisman would result in the terrible consequences mentioned before. Just use it, the sword spirit of Gue Palace said while gritting his teeth. He was obviously suppressing the huge anger in his heart. The captain didn't dare to ask any more questions. He directly sent his sword essence into the talisman. Just like the sword spirit of Gue Palace had said, the talisman was easily removed. This once again proved that the person who sealed the sword spirit of Gue Palace had only used the simplest sealing method to humiliate the sword spirit of Gue Palace. This was the most humiliating method. As the seal was removed, the sword spirit threw away the towel that was wrapped around his body. Then, he picked up a dimensional pouch from where he had fallen. With a thought, he took out a new set of clothes from the dimensional pouch. He closed his eyes and put them on. The sword spirit of Gue Palace was once again wrapped in a handsome set of clothes. Gohan, Gohan. The sword spirit of Gue Palace clenched his fists tightly after putting on his clothes and repeated the name over and over again. He didn't say it softly, so even the other sword bearers around him could hear him clearly. Gohan? Could it be this fellow called Gohan who did this to the sword spirit of Gue Palace? Seeing the sword spirit's expression, as long as the other sword bearers weren't fools, they would be able to guess that the person who had humiliated the sword spirit was Gohan. Oh! Did you hear that, ladies and gentlemen? The culprit behind all of this is a person called Gohan. We will immediately contact the director and ask him to help us look up information on this person called Gohan. The host on the other side spoke excitedly. At this moment, the sword spirit of Gue Palace realized that the situation seemed to have exceeded his imagination. Who is this person? What are you doing here? The sword spirit of Gue Palace asked hurriedly. This. The captain hesitated. He knew that if he told the truth, the sword spirit of Gue Palace would probably vomit blood in anger when he found out that the whole thing was being broadcasted live. However, the captain had no choice but to tell the truth. He could only say hesitantly, he is the host of Exploring the Ruins. We're doing a live broadcast. If the expression of the sword spirit of Gue Palace was as cold as winter in December, then the expression of the sword spirit of Gue Palace right now was as cold as hell. The sword spirit of Gue Palace didn't say anything and directly rushed to the host's side. With a wave of sword chi, the automatic tracking camera that was being broadcasted live was cut into pieces. The audience, who were nervously watching the development of the situation, instantly found that the entire TV screen had turned black. However, this didn't matter because the most critical information had already been broadcast live on TV, and the previous live diagnosis video had also been completely recorded by someone. Then, it was directly published on the internet with a very eye-catching title, Live Broadcast of a Spirit Sword Level Swordsman Naked. Crown Prince Jindi suffered the most cruel humiliation in the world. As a result, just like it was said before, this video began to spread on the internet at an unimaginable speed. In addition, the protagonist this time was a spiritual sword-level sword wielder, who was also the crown prince of the Dragon Lion Sword Emperor. This was extremely explosive news. Therefore, in just one day, more than 50% of the world's people knew about this news. They all knew that Longsure Jindi's son had been stripped naked and thrown down from the sky. Naturally, the name of the sword spirit of Gue Palace, Gahan, also appeared in the audience's attention along with the spread of this news. Chapter 1059. I'm sorry, Father. I've embarrassed you this time. In a private sword tomb in the game world, the sword spirit of Gue Palace said to a man sitting beside him with a wretched expression. This man was none other than the father of the sword spirit of Gue Palace, Longsure Jindi. If I had known that you would end up like this, I wouldn't have agreed to Ing Zheng's request. Longsure Jindi said with a slight frown. Can I refuse Ing Zheng's request? The sword spirit of Gue Palace smiled bitterly. Besides, I underestimated him this time. I didn't expect that Gahan would be able to defeat me, even though he had just come out of Shanghai Pass and had only recovered a few thousand quarks of sword essence. Gahan's strength has exceeded our expectations. I'm afraid we'll have to revise our plan. It doesn't matter. Longsure Jindi waved his hand. The stronger Gahan is, the better. The stronger he is, the smoother our plan will be. What about Ing Zheng? The sword spirit of Gue Palace asked in a somewhat distressed tone. The rest is his own problem. We have done what we promised him. You have also suffered such humiliation. We have been extremely benevolent. Longsure Jindi pondered for a moment with a gloomy expression. No, if Gahan's strength grows too fast, it will be detrimental to our plan. Now, tell me in detail, what level has Gahan reached? After his Heaven-Reliant sword defeated my Aqua Dragon Sparrow, I was about to leave. However, I didn't expect that Gahan wouldn't let me go, so the two of us started fighting. I thought that I could easily defeat Gahan with millions of quarks of sword essence. However, I didn't expect that Gahan's swordsmanship had already reached the level of rules. He only relied on a famed sword maiden with a small amount of sword essence to beat me up. Recalling the battle, the sword spirit of Gue Palace couldn't help but reveal an expression of fear. Rules. Are you saying that Gahan's swordsmanship has already reached the level of rules? Longsure Jindi jumped up from his seat in surprise. Are you sure you're not kidding me? Since ancient times, only Kanzu, Zhetian Jindi, Gu Jin Jindi, and that existence have been able to enter the realm of rules and swordsmanship. Moreover, their swordsmanship entered the realm of rules after the age of 45. Gahan is only 22 years old this year, yet he has already entered the realm of rules? If he hadn't entered the realm of rules, how could I, a top-notch spirit sword-level swordsman, lose to a famed sword-level swordsman with only a few thousand quarks of sword essence. In the end, I was completely controlled by him and humiliated in such a way. The sword spirit of Gue Hall smiled even more bitterly. Everything in the world can be used as a sword. Guhan's swordsmanship has indeed reached the level of rules. Under his rules, I could only let him wear down my personal shield bit by bit. If it weren't for my sword essence being so much more than his, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to hold on for more than 1,000 moves. At most, I would have been defeated within 20 moves. Fighting with him really hurt my self-esteem. After this fight, I wouldn't dare to touch the sword hilt for at least 3 months. Otherwise, my mind would be filled with his sword shadows. I might as well let the sword maiden fight by herself. Didn't you hurt him all? Long sure, Jindy asked again. Not really. At this point, the sword spirit of Gue Hall's face finally revealed a real smile. After all, his sword essence is too inferior to mine. After confirming that his swordsmanship has entered the realm of rules, coupled with his aggressiveness, I simply used that move. I'm afraid that his current situation is not much better than mine. You used that forbidden move? Longsure Jindy was stunned. You sealed his Zifu? Most likely. The sword spirit of Gue Hall said with certainty. Why did he use the simplest sealing method when he sealed me with the sealing rune? It's because he probably couldn't use any sword essence at that time. I'm afraid he even lost contact with the sword marks. Now, the sword maiden is just an ordinary iron sword in his hand. Interesting. Longsure Jindy's mouth curved into a smile. You should immediately tell this news to Ing Zheng and those idiots in Yuzhong City. Otherwise, they won't even have the courage to chase after Gahan again. Tell them about this. The sword spirit of Gue Hall showed a hesitant expression. Now, Guhan is equivalent to an ordinary person. If those people really send people to chase after Gahan again, I'm afraid that Gahan will really die in their hands. Won't our plan be ruined then? Moreover, I'm afraid that existence will also blame us. Father, when that time comes, won't you? It's okay. Although that existence is terrifying, he doesn't have the guts to deal with me. Now, I just want to know how far Gahan can go in this situation. Longsure Jindy said with a smile. This Gue Palace sword spirit. I didn't expect his sword lady to be the Black Death sword. On the other side of the flying droplet, Guhan thought to himself with a serious expression. Just as the sword spirit of Gue Hall had said, Gahan had indeed suffered a very serious injury from his last attack. Moreover, the injury was not a physical injury, but a direct effect on his Zifu. This was the terror of the Black Death sword, a spirit sword maiden. The Black Death sword was the most sinister and vicious sword maiden of the Devil Path. For Yuan Ko, her unique skill could seal the most important parts of Yuan Ko's devil heart and godhead, which could directly cause a devastating blow to Yuan Ko. And for the sword bearer, such a seal would naturally directly affect his Zifu. And the most abnormal thing was that this seal was not a temporary seal like most of the sealing skills, but a permanent effect. Once sealed by the Black Death sword, unless a more powerful sword bearer used violence to break it, the seal would exist forever, and even the caster would not be able to remove it. Of course, such a terrifying unique skill also had its shortcomings. That was, the caster's sword essence must be far higher than the caster's sword essence. Moreover, unless there was a huge difference between the two sides' sword essences, the success rate of sealing between the sword bearers of the same level was only about 20%. Most importantly, once this technique was utilized, the sword essence within the wielder's body would definitely be completely exhausted, and there wouldn't be any leftovers left. Such a unique skill was not very practical. After all, there is only a 20% success rate between opponents of the same level of sword essence. It would be fine if the seal was successful, but if the seal failed, the caster's sword essence would be consumed, and the caster would become a fish that could be easily squashed. However, if there was a huge difference between the two sides' sword essences and there was a 90% success rate, then it would become meaningless. If there was a huge difference between the two sides' sword essences, then there would be no need to use such a unique skill. Wouldn't it be better to just defeat the opponent cleanly? However, at this moment, this had become the most practical skill for the Gue Palace's sword spirit. In any case, he could not defeat Gahan, whose swordsmanship had already entered the realm of the rules. If he persisted like this, he would be defeated by Gahan sooner or later, so he might as well perish together with him. This was because the unique skill could be used as long as the swords of both sides touched. Even though Gahan's swordsmanship had entered the realm of the rules, it was inevitable that their swords would collide. Gahan could not avoid such a seal at all. Most importantly, Gahan's sword essence was only a few thousand quarks, while the Gue Palace's sword spirit's sword essence was hundreds of thousands of quarks. The difference between the two was 100 times, so the success rate of the Black Death sword was infinitely close to 100%. The result was self-evident. Gahan was ruthlessly tricked by the Gue Palace's sword spirit, and his purple palace was forcefully sealed by the Black Death sword. Of course, the Gue Palace's sword spirit also paid a price. All of his sword essence was consumed, and he was easily captured by Gahan. Then, he was controlled by a sealing talisman. Gahan, as long as you are willing to go back with me, I promise that my father will do his best to help you break the seal on your purple palace. This was the Gue Palace's sword spirit's final plan. In order to break the seal on the Black Death sword, a powerful sword-bearer would need to use a huge amount of sword essence to break the seal on the Black Death sword. In order to break the seal on the Black Death sword, you will need at least 10 times more sword essence than when I sealed you. Only then will you be able to break the seal by force. The Gue Palace's sword spirit continued. I used 800,000 quarks of sword essence to seal you, so you will need a sword-bearer with at least 8 million quarks of sword essence to break my seal. How many sword-bearers in the world have 8 million quarks of sword essence? Will they be willing to help you? I promise that as long as you come with me to see my father will definitely help you break the seal, the Gue Palace's sword spirit said. Go with you to see Long, sure, Jindy? Didn't you say that you wanted me to return to the Shanghai Pass? Gahan was not angry that his purple palace had been sealed. Instead, he asked the Gue Palace's sword spirit, I didn't expect your swordsmanship to have entered the realm of rules. This is not in line with our plan. Fine, as long as you are willing to go with me to see my father, I promise that we will no longer be enemies. I still want to be friends with you. The Gue Palace's sword spirit said sincerely. The Gue Palace's sword spirit was sincere, but everyone knew what happened in the end. Gahan did not care about the Gue Palace's I want to be friends with you thought. Instead, he took everything from the Gue Palace to the Shanghai Pass. Originally, Gahan had only planned to throw the Gue Palace into the Shanghai Pass to save the Gue Palace's face. However, after his purple palace had been sealed, Gahan did not hold back anymore. When he found out that there was a live broadcast nearby, he immediately threw the Gue Palace's sword spirit in front of the live broadcast to vent his anger over his purple palace being sealed. However, the Gue Palace's sword spirit had missed something in the end. Gahan's purple palace had not been completely sealed. At the crucial moment, a figure that had not been seen for a long time had appeared to mess things up. Chapter 1060. Actually, when Gahan used the sealing rune to seal the sword spirit of Gue Hall, Gahan realized that his Z Palace had been completely sealed. His first plan was to return the favor and destroy the sword spirit's Z Palace as well. Ever since he had left the Shanghai Pass, he had been accumulating anger in his heart. Otherwise, he would not have taken the initiative to challenge the sword spirit of the Gue Hall to vent his anger after the heavenly sword had defeated the deep-water dragon Sparrow, and the sword spirit of the Gue Hall had made it clear that he did not intend to interfere in this matter. However, Gahan did not expect that he would fail miserably at the very last moment. His Z Palace had been sealed by the sword spirit of Gue Hall. The moment his purple palace was sealed, his connection with his sword mark disappeared without a trace. Itan, who had been sitting on a chair and drinking wine while watching the fight, also turned back into his sword form the moment his purple palace was sealed and fell to the ground. From this moment onwards, until the seal on his purple palace was lifted, not only was Gahan unable to release his sword maiden, He couldn't even communicate with her through the sword mark. Guhan couldn't even use the sword essence in his purple palace. Simply put, Guhan, who had just left Shanghai Pass, felt like he had returned to Shanghai Pass and became an ordinary person again. However, there was still the Zhou Tian Star's Hour banner in Shanghai Pass that could remove the seal. However, even if there were hundreds of Zhou Tian Star's Hour banners beside Guhan, Guhan would not be able to communicate with his sword lady. Guhan had lost his sword lady. Thinking about how he had suddenly lost contact with all his sword ladies and how he could no longer be with Qingpin, Diyu, Juzi, Starting Point, Etian, and the others, as well as all the unfairness he had encountered today, Guhan could not help but feel angry. He was ready to use the same method to take revenge on the sword spirit of Gue Hall. Although Guhan did not have the ability to seal other people's Z Palace like the sword spirit, he could do it more thoroughly. He could destroy the sword spirit's Z Palace directly. However, if Guhan really did that, then Guhan and the sword spirit of Gue Hall and his father, Long Shi Jindi, would have a deep and irreconcilable hatred. Destroying the Z Palace was different from sealing it. After the Z Palace was sealed, he could find a way to remove the seal. There would not be any irreversible consequences. However, if Guhan destroyed the sword spirit's Z Palace, then even if Long Shi Jindi took action, the sword spirit's Z Palace would absolutely not be able to recover. The sword spirit would then completely become an ordinary person. Having said that, everyone could imagine that if Guhan really did that, Long Shi Jindi would definitely fall into a state of madness. Even if Jindi's identity and face were to be thrown away, he would still personally deal with Guhan. At this time, although Guhan's swordsmanship had entered the realm of laws, dealing with Jindi was still like throwing an egg against a rock. Guhan did not have the confidence to escape from an enraged Jindi. However, at that time, Guhan was somewhat blinded by anger. When he was about to recklessly destroy the sword spirit's Z Palace, a crucial voice saved the sword spirit's life. It also saved Guhan's life. "Oh, I had a good sleep. Brat, how long did I sleep this time?" This shrewish voice instantly pulled Guhan out of his anger. Guhan's rationality once again occupied his mind. "Lady Xinyuan?" Guhan was surprised to find that the Xinyuan sword was actually talking to him. Ever since the heaven and earth furnace had been opened and the dot sword had been reforged, the Xinyuan sword had been in a state of deep sleep. It had not spoken a single word to Guhan. Guhan had thought that she would never wake up before he synchronized with her. He had not expected that the Xinyuan sword would magically appear at this time. "Lady Xinyuan, how can you speak to me in my mind? Isn't my Z Palace already?" At this time, Guhan was even more surprised to find that the Xinyuan sword was actually speaking to him in his mind. It must be known that when he had spoken to the Xinyuan sword before, it had directly spoken to him through its body. However, at this moment, the Xinyuan sword's voice had appeared in his mind. This was really too strange. "Bullshit. I'm not your lady sword. Your Z Palace has been sealed, so of course it won't affect me." The Xinyuan sword scolded. "As for why I can speak in your mind, it's because I found quite a few tonics in your body. So, I sent a consciousness clone into your body to eat some tonics. You wouldn't be reluctant to do that, would you?" "Tonics?" Guhan was confused. "How could there be tonics in my body? It's the tonics that sealed your Z Palace." The Xinyuan sword chuckled. "It's been a long time since I've encountered such an appetizing power. I couldn't help but wake up and have a feast." This time, Guhan finally understood. The tonics that the Xinyuan sword had mentioned were actually the power that the Gue Hall sword spirit had used to seal his Z Palace. Wait, if the lady sword had absorbed the power that sealed his Z Palace, didn't that mean that the seal on his Z Palace could be removed in this way? Guhan immediately asked the Xinyuan sword for confirmation. The Xinyuan sword answered, "That's right. As long as I finish these tonics, the seal on your Z Palace can be removed. However, there's quite a lot of them. I'll need at least a month to finish them all. So, during this month, you'll still have to be an ordinary person." Guhan heaved a sigh of relief when he heard the Xinyuan sword's words. Guhan could accept a month's time. Since the problem of his Z Palace being sealed could be resolved, The anger that had been lingering in Gahan's mind had mostly dissipated. Of course, Gahan couldn't destroy the Gue Hall Sword Spirit's Z Palace anymore. However, he had to take revenge. That was why he had thrown the Gue Hall Sword Spirit, who had been stripped naked, onto a live TV show. After throwing the Gue Hall Sword Spirit to the team of sword-bearers, Gahan chatted with the Xianyuan sword in the hovering flying car. Perhaps it was because the Xianyuan sword had to stay in Gahan's body for a long time to eat tonics, so the Xianyuan sword and Gahan chatted a lot. Did you know? Actually, my original name wasn't Xianyuan sword. The Xianyuan sword accidentally revealed a secret. Actually, I already existed before I met the Yellow Emperor. However, at that time, I was called the Witch-Slaying Sword. The Witch-Slaying Sword? The name shocked Gahan. Judging from the meaning of the name, the Xianyuan sword seemed to be a magical sword that was specially used to kill the Wu people. I could smell the strong scent of the Wu people near the city wall. It seems that the Wu people are gathered inside the city wall, right? The Xianyuan sword had been in a deep sleep for a long time while Gahan was fighting in the Shanhai Pass. The last time the Xianyuan sword had mentioned that the world was still in the era of Zhetian Jiandi. Therefore, it seemed that the Xianyuan sword didn't know about the situation in the Shanhai Pass. Therefore, Gahan told the Xianyuan sword everything that had happened in the Shanhai Pass. The Xianyuan sword sighed emotionally. Back then, the demon clan spent a lot of effort to kill 11 of the 12 Zuwu. I didn't expect that all 12 Zuwu would be back in the blink of an eye. I must have been very busy back then. Then, the Xianyuan sword told Gahan about what had happened in the past. It turned out that the Xianyuan sword was not born in the era of the Yellow Emperor, but in the primitive era, which was even earlier than the Yellow Emperor. It had been millions of years since then. According to the Xianyuan sword, she was originally the blade of Panga's axe. Then, Panga's axe turned into the 3 great divine weapons of the primitive era. However, her blade was not so lucky and could not turn into a new primordial treasure. In the end, Demon Emperor Jun kept it in the treasure vault. At that time, the main characters in the world were the Wu people and the Demon Clan. The human clan was just an inconspicuous small race that Nush had just illuminated. In the eyes of the Demon Clan and the Wu people, they were not even food. However, because it was what Lady Nush relied on to become a saint, the Demon Clan and the Wu people did not deliberately attack the human clan. At that time, the Demon Clan and the Wu people fought endlessly for the only main character in the world. Among them, the 12 Zhu Wu's power, as they had inherited Pangu's flesh and blood, were extremely powerful. At the same time, the defensive ability of their bodies was extremely terrifying. According to the Xianyuan sword, even a sword lady at the level of an immortal sword would find it difficult to break through the 12 Zhu Wu's defense. Therefore, every time they really fought with the 12 Zhu Wu, the Demon Clan would usually be the ones who lost in the end. This was because the Demon Clan's top combat power was no match for the Wu people. Later, in order to kill the Wu people, the Demon Clan took out the blade of Panga's axe. With all kinds of extremely precious materials, they forged a magical weapon that could easily cut through the flesh and blood of the Zhu Wu, which was the Wu-Slaying Sword. Later, in the decisive battle between the Demon Clan and the Wu people, Dijun used the Wu-Slaying Sword as his last secret trump card. As expected, he showed his great power and killed the 2 Zhu Wus of the Wu people in one fell swoop. After losing the 2 Zhu Wus, the top strength of the Wu people was no longer a match for the Demon Clan. The balance of power began to turn. The Demon Clan began to attack the Wu people from all directions, while the Wu people retreated step by step. When the Wu people were about to be completely defeated, the Wu people also showed their trump card, which was the 12 Divine Beings Killing Formation. Under the power of the 12 Divine Beings Killing Formation, the Demon Clan suffered heavy losses. Many of the 10 great demon saints died in the battle. However, the Wu people also had their own weaknesses. In order to form the 12 Divine Beings Killing Formation, the remaining 10 Zhu Wus had to use their own essence and blood to forcibly push the 2 great sorcerers to the realm of Zhu Wu. As a result, the 2 Zhu Wus were not stable. In the later stage of the battle, the two Zhu Wus directly fell back to the realm of great sorcerers. This gave the demon clan hope. Therefore, the two clans launched an endless battle that lasted for thousands of years. In the end, 11 Zhu Wus died in the battle. Di Jun and Tai Yi also perished together with the Zhu Wu. Only the Wu-slaying sword fell into the territory of the human clan. It was picked up by Gong's son Xuanyuan's ancestor and worshipped as a magical weapon of his tribe. Chapter 1061. Later on, the human emperor, Yellow Emperor Xianyuan, and the remnants of the sorcerer tribe fought a great battle. In the early stages, he was defeated by the great sorcerer, Jiu Yu, and was defeated again and again. In the end, he remembered that there was still a Wu-slaying sword in the tribe's treasure vault, so he took it out. As expected, the great wizard Qi Yu was no match for the witch-slaying sword when it appeared again. He was defeated, and a part of the Wu people's bloodline merged with the human bloodline. Qi Yu's tribe, the Jiu tribe, escaped to the Miaojiang of today and gradually evolved into the Miao tribe. The Miao tribe eventually mixed with the human bloodline, so there were no more pure Wu people in the world. The witch-slaying sword that helped the Emperor Huang Xianyuan defeat the Wu people officially became the symbol of the Emperor Huang Xianyuan. Later on, the Emperor Huang Xianyuan felt that the witch-slaying sword's murderous aura was too strong and not suitable to suppress the destiny of the human race. Therefore, he opened the furnace of heaven and earth and carved the mountains, rivers, and the four seasons calendar on the blade of the witch-slaying sword. He used the power of heaven and earth and the destiny of the human race to neutralize the sword's murderous aura. From then on, the witch-slaying sword was no longer the divine sword that was used to kill the Wu people. Instead, it officially became the symbol of the human race's destiny. It was the world's #1 emperor sword, the Xianyuan sword. After listening to the story of the Xianyuan sword, Gahan was filled with emotions. He didn't expect there to be so many stories behind it. He didn't expect the Wu people to be so powerful that they could rule the entire Chaos Land. In fact, after the apocalypse, the Demon Emperor Di Jun, the Eastern Emperor Tai, and even the 12 Zhu Wu had returned to this world. However, the Demon Emperor Di Jun and the Eastern Emperor Tai had died in the hands of the heaven-shrouding Jindi, while the other had been seriously injured by the 3 Jindi and had disappeared. The 12 Zhu Wu had been completely sealed in the Shanhai Pass by the human race. It seemed that the human race was even more powerful than the sorcerer and demon races back then. By the way, you said that Nuwa was a saint. What does a saint mean? Gahan suddenly recalled that the Xianyuan sword had mentioned the word saint. According to Gahan, a saint seemed to be Confucius and Laozi, who had founded a great sect. Why was Nuwa, a demon race with a human head and a snake body, called a saint? Although this saint was said to have created the human race in the legends. Sages are the most powerful people in the world. Nothing can kill them except themselves. They have merged with the heavenly Tao of this world. I can't explain it to you in a few words. Anyway, you just need to know that sages are very powerful. If you are lucky enough to see them, just run away, Xianyuan's sword said in a timid manner. What if I synchronize with you? Gahan smiled. At that time, do I still need to turn around and run when I see them? Damn it. I treat you as a friend, but you want to coordinate with me at the same time. What shameless bastard. Xianyuan's sword muttered unhappily, but she still replied, even if you're really synchronized with me, you're not on the same level as those 7 freaks. You probably can't even beat one of their fingers. Anyway, you just have to run away. They won't have the cheek to bully a little guy like you. Xianyuan, sword snorted. 7? Are there 7 sages in total? Gahan asked curiously. Let me count. Nuwa, Jing, Zhuanti, Taishang Laojun, Yuanshi Tianzuan, Tongtian sect leader, and the guy whose name I can't even say. Well, it's 7, Xianyuan's sword said as it calculated. Tongtian sect leader. Hearing this name from Xianyuan's sword's mouth, Gahan was excited. Wasn't this the legendary wielder of the Qingping sword? Lady Xianyuan, who is this Tongtian sect leader? What's his weapon? Gahan forcibly suppressed the excitement in his heart and asked in a calm tone as possible. He's the incarnation of Panga's spirit, so his weapon is, of course, a sword. That guy likes to use swords the most, especially the 4 immortal killing swords and the Qingping sword. They're simply. Xin Yuan's sword suddenly felt sick and shut its mouth instantly. Obviously, it found that it had leaked something. Lady Xin Yuan, please tell me about Tong Tian's sect leader. This is very important to me. Gahan could no longer hide his emotions and said very excitedly, well, although I'm not afraid of Tong Tian's sect leader, I don't want to be targeted by him. That's a terrible thing. Xin Yuan's sword said it was not afraid of Tong Tian's sect leader, but said it was a terrible thing the next moment. Obviously, Xin Yuan's sword was still very afraid of Tong Tian's sect leader. Looking at Xin Yuan's sword's attitude, Gahan knew it would be difficult to get more information from Xin Yuan's sword. But it didn't matter. Since Xin Yuan's sword was living in his body now, he would have a chance to get the information he needed from Xin Yuan's sword sooner or later. Gahan and Xin Yuan's sword talked about some other topics. At the same time, he looked at the positioning system of his personal terminal and found that the droplet flying car had traveled somewhere between Yanjing City and Yuzhong City. At this speed, it would probably take about 5 hours to return to Yuzhong City. But Gahan's journey was destined to not be so smooth. When he was helping Xin Yuan's sword locate him, a strong alarm suddenly sounded inside the droplet flying car. Warning! Research vehicle number 4475-7865 has insufficient energy and is unable to maintain flight. It will automatically land in 5 minutes. Warning! Research vehicle number 4475-7865 has insufficient energy and is unable to maintain flight. It will automatically land in 4 minutes and 59 seconds. The droplet flying car actually ran out of energy. This sudden situation caught Gahan off guard. Only then did Gahan remember that ever since he owned the droplet flying car, he had never cared about the energy problem of the droplet flying car. This was because all hovercrafts relied on a small nuclear fuel cell inside them for power. A small nuclear fuel cell was enough for a hovercraft to use for 1,000 years, so there was no problem with the hovercraft needing to recharge its energy. But this droplet flying car was different. This droplet flying car was a research vehicle created by a super ancient civilization 6 million years ago. If the battery of an ordinary mobile phone was completely shut down for a year, the battery in the battery would be exhausted, not to mention the fact that the energy source of this droplet flying car had been released for 6 million years. The energy source of the droplet flying car had not been recharged for 6 million years. Previously, flying around with Gahan had already used up the little energy it had left. Now that the droplet flying car was alive, it was only natural. How do I recharge the energy of research vehicle number 4475-7865? Gahan tried to use his mind to ask the control terminal of the droplet flying car. Please inject the control terminal of research vehicle number 4475-7865 with the power of chaos. It can replenish the energy of research vehicle number 4475-7865. The control terminal gave the answer to Gahan's question, but the answer was the same as not giving it. Now that Gahan did not even have the sword element, where could he find the power of chaos? However, the name Power of Chaos still made Gahan's heart skip a beat. It was somewhat similar to the classification of Flood and Desolate class Yuan Ko. Could it be that there was some kind of connection between them? Well, now is not the time to think about these things. After waiting for 5 minutes, the droplet flying car stopped firing on time and fell directly from the sky in a free fall. During the fall, the droplet flying car directly kicked Gahan out of the droplet flying car, causing Gahan to directly come into close contact with the ground. I didn't expect my body to become so fragile after my purple palace was sealed. Because the purple palace was sealed, Gahan's body had completely returned to the level of an ordinary person. As a result, the bone in Gahan's left leg was directly fractured, and his entire left leg was twisted in a strange posture. Forget it. I'll just eat a nanomedical capsule. At this time, the most economical way was, of course, to lie in a medical cabin and use the medical cabin to treat his leg. However, the problem was that in this wilderness full of Yuan Ko, without the protection of a fellow swordsman, lying in the medical cabin to treat his leg was no different from seeking death. Therefore, using the nanomedical capsule to treat the leg bone was the most correct choice. However, when Lung Qingxiu instinctively prepared to take out the nanomedical capsule from the dimensional pocket, she found that when the purple palace was sealed, even the dimensional pocket was sealed. Gahan couldn't take anything out of the dimensional pocket at all. So, I've become a cripple? Only now did Gohan realize that his situation had become abnormally bad. The droplet flying car had stopped firing at the wrong time. It happened to be in the ruined area between Yuzhong City and Yinjing City. This area was completely Yuan Ko's territory. If it was the previous Gahan, as long as it wasn't a universe rank or a universe rank Yuan Ko, Gahan could easily send them back to their own dimension. But now, Gohan's purple palace was sealed, and he had completely become an ordinary person. Although Gahan was still fearless against low-level Yuan Ko, and could easily kill these Yuan Ko by relying on his swordsmanship, if he met a nether rank or meteor rank Yuan Ko, then Gahan wouldn't be so confident. Not to mention that Gahan had now become a cripple. His left leg had been completely crippled, and his mobility had been severely restricted. This caused Gahan's swordsmanship to drop by more than 90%. When a person lost the ability to move, then no matter how brilliant his swordsmanship was, he was nothing more than a live target. To make a simple comparison, Gohan's current swordsmanship wasn't as brilliant as it was when he had just turned 18. At this moment, even if only a ghost rank Yuan Ko appeared, it would probably be able to easily take Gahan's life. The only thing that Gahan could rejoice about was that when his purple palace was sealed, the heavenly sword happened to be drinking outside, unlike the other sword ladies that were temporarily placed in his dimensional pocket. Otherwise, when Yuan Ko attacked, Gohan wouldn't even have a weapon that could fight against Yuan Ko. Then, he could only wait for death. However, Gohan's current situation was only a little better than waiting for death. Chapter 1062. Lu Yunyue struggled to move forward with the team. This was a team of 8 sword-bearers. 4 of the 8 sword-bearers were carrying a medical pod, while the other 2 were leading the way. Lu Yunyue and one of the sword-bearers were at the back, in charge of protecting the team's retreat. From the outside, although the sword-bearers' clothes were clean and simple, their morale was not high. In fact, it could be said that their morale was low. Some of the sword-bearers had wounds on their bodies that were bleeding profusely. These wounds were not even bandaged and were left exposed. From this point, it was obvious that this team was in a desperate situation. The wounds on their bodies were not bandaged, which meant that they had run out of healing potions. This team of 8 did not have the strength to carry 2 medical pods at the same time, so they could only let the most heavily injured sword-bearer enter the medical pod to save his own life. As for the superficial wounds that were not life-threatening, they could only leave it to fate. Reporting Captain, there are signs of a battle ahead, and there are also Yuan Ko's roars in the distance. We suspect that there are sword-bearers fighting with Yuan Ko. The 2 sword-bearers who were leading the way suddenly ran back and said to a middle-aged man who was carrying a medical pod. Hearing this, the captain instantly became nervous. Su Junjia, can you find out the level and number of Yuan Ko? Logically speaking, when they discovered that there was a comrade fighting with Yuan Ko, the team should have immediately rushed over to help without hesitation. However, the problem was that their current situation was that they lacked medicine. At the same time, the sword-bearer's combat power was severely damaged. If they rushed over rashly, not only would they not be able to save the sword-bearer, but they would also send their own team into danger. As the captain of this team, he had to consider the collective interests of the team. If Yuan Ko's level was too high, or if there were too many of them, the captain could only lead his team to escape in another direction. Wait a moment, I'll let the dark gold sword take a look. Su Junjie closed his eyes, clearly beginning to share his vision with his sword mistress. After about 5 minutes, Su Junja suddenly opened his eyes and said, "I see it. It's 3 orcs surrounding an injured swordsman. The swordsman's left leg seems to be fractured, so he can only fight with his back against a pine tree. Furthermore, his sword Maiden seemed to have been severely injured and could no longer be released. He could only use the sword Maiden's body to fight. However, his swordsmanship was very strong, and those half-beastmen could not get close to him at all. However, this sword wielder's stamina is being consumed very quickly. I'm afraid he won't be able to hold on for much longer." Su Junjie, who shared his vision with the sword lady, quickly told them what he had discovered. Shang Yi, the leader of the team, hesitated for a while before asking his teammates, "What do you guys think? Should we go and save the sword bearer? I think we should just forget about it. Qin Liang and Yu sword maidens are about to shatter. It's impossible for them to fight anymore. Mel Lauer is lying in the medical pod and needs to be taken care of. How can we save the besieged swordsman?" "That's right. You're right. You're right. No, we have to go and save him." The tallest sword bearer in the team immediately retorted, "As a sword bearer, how can you not save your comrade when he's in danger? Is this what a sword bearer should do? Have you guys forgotten the code of conduct of a sword bearer? The first lesson we learned when we entered Yuzhong University is to do our best to save our comrade. I don't think we should waste any more time here. Li Xiangtian, since you're so afraid of death, you can stay here and take care of the medical pod. We'll go and save the sword bearer." "Please, Chu Hanming, didn't you hear that there are 3 half-beastmen surrounding the sword bearer?" Li Xiangtian tried his best to persuade him. "These half-beastmen are ghost-level Yuan Ko. It's not that easy to deal with them. We might have to pay a heavy price. It's not worth it for a sword bearer that we don't know. It's just 3 ghost-level Yuan Ko. We have 2 saber-level sword bearers and 4 saber-level sword bearers. How can we not deal with 3 ghost-level Yuan Ko? As long as we rush over, we can save our comrade. It's such a simple matter. What's there to hesitate about? It's the life of a comrade we're talking about." Chu Hanming argued loudly. "Chu Hanming, I'll be honest here. The one with a broken leg is just a burden. Even if we save him, I'm afraid we'll still have to take care of him. He'll only be a burden to us. We're lost in this forest, and we don't have enough food and medicine. If we bring along a sword bearer with a broken leg, we'll only die faster. You're shameless. Do you still have any honor as a sword bearer? How dare you say such shameless words? What burden? That's our comrade. We can't leave him behind." Chu Hanming and Li Xiangtian began to argue fiercely. The other sword bearers in the team expressed their stance with silence. Shang Yi sighed. Deep down in his heart, he was also not inclined to save them. His team was already on the verge of collapsing. If another injured sword wielder joined the fray, the team would most likely collapse before they could even make it through. Just as Shang Yi was about to announce his decision, Lu Yinyue, who was at the back of the team, suddenly said weakly, "I think he might know how to get out of this forest." Lu Yinyue's words caused everyone to fall silent. After a while, Shang Yi gritted his teeth and said, "Qin Liang, Yu, the 2 of you will leave your sword ladies here. The rest of you will attack together and save that comrade. There really aren't any fools in this world." Gahan, who was dealing with 3 half-beastmen at the same time, had long sensed that a sword lady was lurking beside him. This meant that there was at least 1 sword bearer nearby. At first, this discovery made Guhan overjoyed. Gahan had been struggling in this forest for 3 whole days. These 3 days were probably the most miserable days of Gahan's life. The droplet flying car was indeed a high technology from the previous civilization. It actually had the ability to shrink. When it fell to the ground, it turned into a palm-sized droplet flying car model. Gahan could easily put it in his pocket and carry it with him. However, the dimensional pocket still could not be opened. It was equivalent to Gahan losing all of his biological resources. In the end, he could only rely on some wild fruits to satisfy his hunger. Alone in the extremely dangerous wilderness, and having lost his sword element, Gahan did not dare to sleep for the past 3 days. He He was afraid that he would be ambushed by Yuan Ko while he slept. At most, he could only close his eyes for a while on a tree. Therefore, Gahan's days were quite miserable. Therefore, when Gahan found someone beside him, he was quite happy. At the very least, he could eat normal food and sleep in a tent. More importantly, the other party must have medicine or medical pods that could help him heal his damned broken leg. As long as his broken leg could recover, Guhan was confident that he could walk all the way to Yuzhong City without any obstacles. However, the Sword Maiden hid in the grass and did not move. This let Gahan know that she might not want to save him. This made Gahan a little puzzled. This was the area between Yanjing City and Yuzhong City. It was an area where human forces were the weakest. There were many Yuan Ko here, and their levels were also very high. Logically speaking, the sword bearers who could venture into this area should be at least at the level of precious swords or famed swords. These 3 ghost-level Yuan bandits were just small monsters that they could easily get rid of. Why were they hesitating for so long? Just as Gahan was considering whether or not he should hurry up and finish off these half-beastmen, the sound of running came from afar. This made Gahan let out a sigh of relief. It seemed that these sword-bearers still had some humanity and courage, coming to save an unlucky fellow like him. Sure enough, 6 sword maidens came out of the bushes one after another and surrounded the half-beastmen. 4 ancient sword rank sword maidens and 2 sword rank sword maidens. This is still a little weak. Guhan looked at the levels of the sword maidens that came to save him and finally understood why the sword bearers were hesitating. This team of sword bearers was actually made up of 4 ancient sword rank and 2 sword rank sword maidens. But such a team of sword bearers should not have appeared in such a dangerous area. This was too strange. Comrade, hold on, the tallest of the 6 sword maidens said. Guhan recognized this sword maiden. This sword maiden was the mountain-suppressing sword of a treasured sword rank sword maiden. However, the original mountain-suppressing sword was currently in Song Hama's hands, so the mountain-suppressing sword that had appeared was clearly a man-made sword maiden. When the 3 half-beastmen saw the new sword maiden appear, they immediately gave up on surrounding Gahan and charged at the new sword maiden. 2 of the sword rank sword maidens immediately blocked one of the half-beastmen, while the other 4 sword rank sword maidens worked together to attack the remaining half-beastmen. These 3 half-beastmen had actually been hit in many of their vital spots by Guhan, and they had lost a lot of their stamina and blood. As such, dealing with them was much easier than the sword maidens had imagined. In less than 5 minutes, the half-beastmen that had been surrounded by the 4 ancient sword rank sword maidens screamed and died on the ground. A dimensional vortex then appeared. The 4 ancient sword rank sword maidens immediately stuck their sword hilts into the dimensional vortex. After absorbing the sword essence in the vortex, they could help the other 2 sword rank sword maidens fight and quickly finish off the remaining half-beastmen. And the dimensional vortex left behind by the 2 half-beastmen naturally belonged to the 2 sword rank sword maidens. Chapter 1063. Comrade, are you all right? Shang Yi asked with concern. Guhan looked at the sword bearers in front of him and was even more confused. These sword bearers really were made up of 6 ancient sword bearers and 2 treasured sword bearers. 2 of the sword bearers did not have sword maidens behind them. They did not look like sword masters who did not rely on sword maidens to fight. This meant that the sword maidens of the 2 sword bearers had already been broken. As for the one lying in the med bay, Gahan did not know what level he was. However, he estimated that he was at most a famed swordsman. He really did not understand why such a weak sword-bearer team would appear in such a dangerous place. I'm fine, just a broken leg. Everything else is fine, Gahan said calmly. It must be fate that brought us together. Let me introduce you to each other. Shang Yi took the initiative to introduce himself. I am the leader of this team. My name is Shang Yi from Yuzhong City. I am a treasured swordsman. The tallest one is Chu Hanming, also from Yuzhong City. He is my childhood friend and an ancient swordsman. The smartest one is Li Xiangtian from Yanjing City. However, he has lived in Yuzhong City since he was young, so he can be considered half a native. He is an ancient swordsman. The darkest one is Qin Liang from Yuzhong City. He is an ancient swordsman. The fattest one is Yu Yu from Yuzhong City. He is an ancient swordsman. The most agile one is Su Junjie from Yuzhong City. He is an ancient swordsman. And our little beauty, Lu Yunyue from Yuzhong City. She is an ancient swordsman. Although she has only been a swordsman for a month, her strength is already very good. She is a little genius. The serious one is Zhuo Ryu from Yuzhong City. He is a treasured swordsman. And Zhuo Ryu, he is a warrior, also known as a swordmaster. And the one lying in the med bay is Miss Millar from London. If it weren't for her, we would have died along the way. It's a pity that Miss Mellauer was seriously injured yesterday, and I don't know when she'll recover. It seemed that this team leader was an extremely talkative fellow. In the blink of an eye, he had introduced all the members of the team to Gahan. From these words, one could tell that this team was basically made up of swordsmen from Yuzhong City. They were even from Gahan's hometown. However, what Gahan did not understand was why a female swordsman from London would join this team. It did not make sense. Of course, Gahan did not have the time to care about this, because Shangyi immediately asked Gahan, "May I know where this comrade is from? What's your name? Why would he appear here? These people don't know me." At first, Gahan was a little worried. After all, he was more or less a celebrity in Yuzhong City. His trial in court was big news in Yuzhong City. Gahan thought that most of the swordsmen in Yuzhong City would be able to recognize his face. He did not expect that none of the 8 people in front of him could recognize him. It was a little unscientific. What Gahan did not know was that this was all thanks to the old guys in Yuzhong City. Ever since Gahan went to Shanghai Pass, the old guys in Yuzhong City began to use their influence to block most of the videos related to the trial on the internet. At the same time, they strictly prohibited all media from talking about anything related to Gahan. After all, humans were forgetful creatures. After more than 3 years, Gahan's memory had become blurred. If they did not tell Gahan his name, they would not have associated this person's face with Gahan. Coupled with the fact that Gahan had been living in the forest for 3 days, his entire person was unkempt and dirty. It was natural that he couldn't recognize Gahan's appearance. "My name is..." At the same time, Gahan began to hesitate. He had forced his way out of Shanghai Pass and humiliated the sword spirit of the Gue Hall. He might be wanted by all the base cities. If his purple palace was not sealed, he would not be afraid of being wanted. However, the problem was that his purple palace was sealed and one of his legs was broken. He would not be able to handle a large number of sword maidens. Moreover, he wanted to follow the swordsman to get some clean food and clothes and live a comfortable life for a few days. Therefore, it was better for him not to reveal his real name. He would just think of a random name. But what kind of fake name should he think of? For a while, Gahan could not think of a reliable name. However, he obviously could not delay answering this question for too long. Otherwise, others would see that he was deceiving them. Therefore, Gahan began to search for the names he had met in his memory. He then remembered that he had picked up a mobile phone from 1,000 years ago in the 12 skyscraping temples. The owner of this mobile phone was called Lung Qingxiu. Obviously, this Lung Qingxiu from 1,000 years ago was dead. There should be no problem in borrowing his name. Moreover, Lung Qingxiu's surname was Lung, which corresponded with the cold in his name. Cold, this was fate. Therefore, Gahan answered Shangyi. "I am Lung Qingxiu, a famous swordsman in Yanjing City. I was separated from my teammates in a battle and unknowingly came to this barren land. If I had not met you, I am afraid I would not have lived for more than a few days. You are a famous swordsman." Hearing his own level, the rest of the swordsmen were shocked. They did not expect that they had saved a famous swordsman. This time, it seemed that they had made a big profit. With a famous swordsman joining the team, the safety of the team would certainly improve a lot. But soon, these sword-bearers had doubts in their hearts. If this Ling Qingxiu was really a famous sword-rank sword-bearers, then why was it so difficult for him to deal with 3 ghost-level Yuanko half-beastmen? For a famous sword-rank sword-bearers, shouldn't these half-beast men be directly dealt with 1 sword strike? I am really a famous swordsman. Guhan gently pressed on his personal terminal, and a golden chrysanthemum was projected out. There were many ways for a swordsman to prove his level. The simplest way was, of course, to take out his sword maiden. If there was a sword maiden, then it was an ancient swordsman, and if there were two, then it was a treasure swordsman. This was the most reliable way. But the problem was that Gahan had put his sword maiden in his dimensional pocket, so he could not take it out to prove it. Another way was to exchange identity information through the personal terminal to confirm the level of the other swordsman. But once identity information was exchanged, Gahan's information would also be leaked. The last way was to project the level logo on the personal terminal. The ancient swordsman's level icon was a begonia flower, the treasure swordsman's level icon was a pear flower, and the famous swordsman's level icon was a chrysanthemum. These flowers could only be set in the personal terminal by the sword committee. It was absolutely impossible to fake it in other ways. This way, Gahan could prove his swordsman level without exposing his real information. Junior Shang Yi pays respect to Lord Lung Qingxiu. Junior Li Xiangtian pays respect to Lord Lung Qingxiu. Junior Lu Yinyue pays respect to Lord Lung Qingxiu. Seeing the chrysanthemum appear, Gahan's swordsman level had already been confirmed. These ancient and treasure swordsmen immediately saluted Gahan. Although this was not a rigid etiquette set by the sword committee, it was a tacit, unspoken rule to salute high-level swordsmen. Similarly, no one would object to this rule. Great, with Lord Lung Qingxiu here, we will definitely be able to reach our destination safely, Shang Yi said with some excitement. Lord Lung Qingxiu, you will definitely protect us, right? I am ashamed. Gohan's face stiffened. 3 days ago, I met a nether-level Yuan Ko. Although I used all my strength to kill it, my Zifu also received fatal damage. All the sword essence has already disappeared along with the collapse of my Zifu. Now, besides my own sword maiden, I no longer have any other fighting strength. What? Shang Yi and the other swordsman's expression instantly changed. Although Su Junjie had already told them that there might be a problem with this swordsman Zifu, but they didn't expect that it was actually true. This famous sword-level swordsman Zifu was actually destroyed by Yuan Ko. In this way, what was the difference between this famous sword-level swordsman and an ordinary person? No, judging from his leg, he was even inferior to an ordinary person. At least when danger came, an ordinary person could escape and not become a burden to them. I didn't expect Lord to be able to jump levels and kill a nether-level Yuan Ko. This junior is extremely impressed. Shang Yi's expression changed unpredictably. How could he believe that Gohan had the ability to jump levels and kill a nether-level Yuan Ko? He must have been seriously injured by this nether-level Yuan Ko and escaped. Otherwise, he wouldn't only have a famous sword-level sword maiden left. His ancient sword and treasure sword-level sword maiden must have already been lost on the battlefield. Lord, do you really not have any sword essence left? Shang Yi still asked with some reluctance. No. Otherwise, how could these 3 little half-beastmen make me so embarrassed? Gohan said with a bitter face. What about Lord's personal belongings, medicine? They are all in my dimensional pocket. But I don't have any sword essence right now, so I can't open my dimensional pocket at all. It's the same as not having any. Gohan's face became even more bitter. Then your famous sword-level sword maiden. Without sword essence, it is impossible to release it. But I still have some confidence in my swordsmanship. When the time comes, I will personally come out to fight, Gohan said while patting his chest. Thank you, Lord. Shang Yi clenched his teeth. He wanted to cry, but no tears came out. He thought that saving a famous sword-level big shot could protect him and the others. He didn't expect that in the end. He saved a cripple who needed him to take care of him. What was going on? Little brother, do you have any more nanocapsules? My leg hurts so much. Gohan said in the end, as if he was asking for a beating. Chapter 1064. Thank you very much. Gahan, who was missing a leg, and the girl named Lu Yinyue walked at the back of the group. After learning that Gahan had turned from a famed sword-bearer to a complete piece of trash, The other sword-bearers no longer had any interest in talking to Gahan. They didn't even look at Gahan. The girl named Lu Yunyue still maintained a trace of kindness and generously accepted Gahan. She even shared what little food she had with Gahan. As the saying goes, there is no harm without comparison. Compared to those snobbish sword-bearers, Lu Yunyue's generosity touched Gahan. At the same time, Gahan made up his mind that when he returned to Yuzhong City, he would definitely give this girl some rewards to repay her kindness. At the same time, Gahan also learned from Lu Yunyue why this small group had appeared in such a dangerous area. In fact, the source of the matter was Lu Yunyue. It was said that Lu Yunyue's ancestor had also produced a top-notch sword-bearer. However, this matter had happened a very long time ago. After hundreds of years, Lu Yunyue's family had even forgotten the name of that top-notch sword-bearer. They only knew that such a sword-bearer had indeed existed. Ever since that top-notch sword-bearer, Lu Yunyue's family had never produced another sword-bearer. That sword-bearer only existed in the family's legends and stories for future generations to brag about, to pat their chests and brag to others. Back then, my family also had an immortal sword-level sword-bearer. Fortunately, Lu Yunyue's family had never experienced any major disasters, and the family's property had not been damaged. Therefore, Lu Yunyue's family still had a lot of old items from hundreds of years ago. The reason for this operation was because of these old things. 2 months ago, Lu Yunyue had successfully synchronized with a man-made sword mistress in the sword pavilion and became an ancient sword-bearer. After hundreds of years, another swordsman had appeared in the clan. This caused the entire Lu Yunyue's clan to be in a state of celebration. Hundreds of clan members gathered together to celebrate for Lu Yunyue, as if the revival of the clan was just around the corner. However, after the celebration was over, the oldest elder in Lu Yunyue's family, who was said to be Lu Yunyue's great-uncle, quietly pulled Lu Yunyue's hand and led her into a warehouse filled with all sorts of ancient items. This great-uncle said to Lu Yunyue in a trembling voice, there was a saying that had been passed down in the family since ancient times. If there was a descendant who could become a sword-bearer again, he should come here. There would be a treasure waiting for him. In the beginning, Lu Yunyue didn't take this to heart because the room was filled with broken ancient objects. Lu Yunyue carefully searched around 2 or 3 times but didn't find anything that could be called a treasure. However, in order to not make her great-uncle sad, Lu Yunyue randomly picked a music box that looked relatively intact and brought it back. That night, when Lu Yunyue was playing with the music box, she was surprised to find that the little person on the music box could actually be taken out. There was a small note hidden in the little person's stomach. She didn't know how many years this music box had been through, but the note inside the music box was still as white as new, as if it had just been placed inside. Through reading the words on this small piece of paper, Lu Yunyue discovered a shocking secret. It turned out that this music box had been left behind by Lu Yunyue's sword-bearer ancestor. This ancestor said on the note that before he died, he had a premonition that his clan would not have a successor and would enter a decline. In order to prevent the treasures he left behind from being squandered by his disdainful descendants, Lu Yunyue's ancestor had buried these precious treasures in a mysterious place. If anyone in the future became a sword-bearer, they could find the treasures left behind by the ancestor according to the treasure map left behind on the note, allowing the clan to rise again. Normally, after seeing the contents of the note, people would definitely hide the note securely. They wouldn't reveal it to anyone and would secretly take away the treasures themselves. Or they could wait until they were strong enough to find the buried treasures. However, Lu Yunyue was a pure and cute girl. She actually gave this note to her clan because she felt that the wealth belonged to her clan and not her alone. She couldn't enjoy the wealth alone. When Lu Yunyue's clan found out that their ancestor had buried such a fortune, they immediately fell into a state of ecstasy. These people were used to living in poverty, but once they found out that their family still had a huge amount of wealth hidden outside, they could no longer be at ease. All they talked about was this wealth and how good of a life they could live after obtaining it. As a result, the poor days they were used to became hard to get used to. No one was willing to continue waiting like this. They wanted to immediately take out this fortune. However, looking at the location marked on the map, it was a place between Yinjing City and Yuzhong City. With just the power of an ancient sword-bearer, it was impossible to take it out. After a discussion, these people decided to form a team of sword-bearers and let this team take out the fortune. At the same time, they were willing to give a third of the fortune to these sword-bearers as compensation. Then, these people suddenly became smarter. They felt that they couldn't invite sword-bearers of too high a level. Otherwise, if those sword-bearers wanted to swallow the fortune, they couldn't do anything about it. They could only choose some ancient or treasure sword-bearers. This way, the risk of the fortune being swallowed was very low. At the same time, the only sword-bearer in the clan, Lu Yunyue, wouldn't lose the right to speak in the team. In order to prevent the news from spreading, Lu Yunyue's clan decided not to publicly announce the mission. Instead, they used the relationship of the clan head to invite trustworthy sword-bearers who had a certain level of relationship to join. Lu Yunyue's clan was just a normal clan. How many sword-bearers could she know? How many of them were related by blood? So in the end, they only managed to invite a mere 12 sword-bearers. Among them, 2 were treasure sword-bearers, and 10 were ancient sword-bearers. Including Lu Yunyue, there were 13 people. As the saying goes, the ignorant are fearless. At the same time, they were blinded by the wealth. So, these ancient and treasure sword-bearers prepared to come to this dangerous place to dig up the fortune. But in the end, someone leaked the news, and a famous swordsman from London, Mel Lauer, took the initiative to look for her. He expressed his desire to join the team, and at the same time, he wanted to get 10% of the team's wealth. Otherwise, she would make the news public. After being threatened by Mel Lauer, the others had no choice but to pinch their noses and accept the threat. So, a team of 14 people was formed. They first took the heavy armor train between Yuzhong City and Yinjing City to reach the location closest to the treasure. Then, they got off the train halfway and began to advance towards their destination. At first, these sword-bearers were very angry and resentful of Mel Lauer's sudden addition. But after only 10 days, this anger and resentment turned into joy. Over the course of these 5 days, 5 of the 14 people had already died at the hands of Yuenko. If not for Mel Lauer, the famed sword-grade swordsman, these ancient sword-grade and treasure sword-grade swordsmen would have already died here. Only now did the sword-bearers realize what a foolish decision they had made. They actually thought that such a weak team could get close to the core of Yuenko's territory. However, Mel Lauer was only a famous sword-bearer. In yesterday's battle, the team had encountered 2 dragon-level Yuan-ko. Mel Lauer had used all his strength to kill the 2 dragon-level Yuan-ko. However, he had been seriously injured and had fallen into a coma. Considering that the team desperately needed Mel Lauer's strength, the team decided to carry Mel Lauer's medical pod and advance together. This was the situation before this team met Gahan. What was even more tragic was that these 2 Yuan-kos were actually Yuan-kos of the Science and Technology Department. These 2 Yuan-kos had used an unknown technology to destroy the system of all personal terminals, causing all personal terminals to fail. Even the function of navigation had been lost, causing the entire team to get lost in this forest. However, this also gave Gahan a reason to exist in this team. After learning that Gohan's personal terminal was not damaged and still had the function of navigation, Shang Yi and the others finally revealed a trace of smile. They then handed the map of the buried treasure to Gahan and let Gahan guide them. This was something that Gahan had never thought of. Gahan didn't think that his existence would actually have a meaning because of a small function of navigation. Thinking about it, it was really ridiculous. From beginning to end, Shang Yi and the others hadn't said anything about giving Gahan a share of the treasure. He was just a crippled, ordinary person, and saving his life was already extremely benevolent. How dare they hope to share their treasures? Of course, Gahan also had no interest in the treasures left behind by Lu Yunyue's ancestor. Any treasure that Gahan casually took out from his dimensional pocket would probably be more valuable than the treasures in the treasure. Compared to those treasures, Gahan was more interested in the team's food and medicine. The food was still all right. Gahan could get some food from Lu Yunyue, but the medicine was really gone. Most of the medicine in this team had been used up, and the remaining medicine was treated as a treasure by Shang Yi. Using it required his approval. A cripple like Gahan naturally didn't have the qualifications to obtain precious medicine. Time passed like this for another 2 days. In these 2 days, under Gahan's guidance, the team was getting closer and closer to the treasure on the map. However, at the same time, danger was gradually approaching the team. Chapter 1065. Su Junjie, who was scouting, was the first to discover danger. He suddenly discovered a raging flame in the forest in the distance. It was not unusual for a forest to be on fire, but what was unusual was that the flame did not cause any smoke when it burned. It was natural for a flame to cause smoke when it burned a tree. If there was no smoke when it burned, it meant that the flame was not a normal flame. It was most likely caused by Yuan Ko, because only Yuan Ko's flame could cause the result of burning without smoke. Everyone be on guard. Retreat immediately and stay away from this area. We'll go over this hill before moving forward. Shang Yi's team had long been beaten senseless by Yuan Ko. After discovering signs of Yuan Ko, their first reaction was to escape immediately. They absolutely did not want to come into direct contact with Yuan Ko. Although this method was very cowardly, it was an effective method. It was precisely by relying on this cowardly method that the team had successfully avoided many Yuan Kos. However, this time the danger was not so easy to avoid. Although the team was trying their best to retreat, the flame was advancing towards the team at a speed visible to the naked eye. Obviously, Yuan Ko had discovered the team. There's no other way. Everyone, prepare for battle. Shang Yi knew that there was no way to escape at this time, so he could only face it head-on. At the same time, Shang Yi secretly hoped that this Yuan Ko would be an easier Yuan Ko to deal with. He hoped that there would not be another Flood Dragon or Dragon Yuan Ko. All the members of the team immediately released their sword ladies and let them rush in the direction of the flame, trying to position the battlefield at a safe distance of 1 kilometer away from them. Otherwise, if they let Yuan Ko get close to them, they were afraid that Yuan Ko would first kill the leader. This kind of fighting style made Gahan very uncomfortable. After all, when Gahan fought, he always carried the sword ladies and rushed forward. How could he let the sword ladies fight in front while he hid behind them a kilometer away? However, this was indeed the standard fighting style of ordinary sword bearers. After all, there were not many sword bearers in the world who were as powerful as Gahan. Once Yuan Ko got close, only death would await him. Lu Yunyue's sword maiden naturally followed the other sword maidens and rushed over. Lu Yunyue's sword maiden also shared her sword maiden's vision. After about 5 minutes, Gahan clearly felt Lu Yunyue's body tremble violently. It was clear that Lu Yunyue's sword maiden had already faced off against Yuan Ko. Yunyue, what kind of Yuan Ko is it this time? Gahan asked Lu Yunyue curiously. A very powerful Yuan Ko. Lu Yunyue bit her lips. He looks like an ordinary Western human, but his entire body is emitting raging flames, as if his entire body is burning. Fireman? Hearing this description, Gahan could not help but recall the Yuan Ko Fireman brand from League of Legends he met in the furnace of heaven and earth. However, Brand had already died by his hands, so this flaming Yuan Ko was obviously not Brand. So powerful. Shang Yi said that this is at least a Flood Dragon level Yuan Ko. Lu Yunyue's voice suddenly became anxious. It was clear that the battle on the other side had entered an extremely heated state. Gahan was very interested to see how the battle was going, but he could only think about it. At this moment, Gahan could not release any sword maiden. His flames are so powerful. My sword maiden touched it slightly, and the energy of my personal shield was reduced by 1/3. Lu Yunyue's expression became more and more nervous. Suddenly, Chu Hanming in the distance roared, "Go! Don't be a coward, kill this damn guy for me." What happened? Gahan immediately asked curiously. Chu Hanming's sword Maiden used her ultimate move. We have restricted Yuan Ko's mobility. Lu Yunhue replied, then immediately said, it's a success. Zhuozong's Sun and Moon Sword Maiden has hit Yuan Ko's heart. However, this Yuan Ko does not seem to be afraid of this, and he does not seem to have suffered much damage. That's great. It turns out that this Yuan Ko is afraid of water. Su Junji's aqua blue sword has done a great job. This Yuan Ko's flames have been greatly reduced by a large amount of purified water. I reckon that as long as his flames are completely extinguished, we can win. Through the battle report from Lu Yunhue, Gahan barely understood the situation on the other side of the battle. The sword bearers were at a disadvantage at the beginning, but they quickly discovered that this Yuan Ko was afraid of water. Therefore, Su Junjie, who shot out water attribute attacks, became the trump card of the battle. With the cooperation of his teammates, they gradually suppressed this Yuan Ko, and victory was already within reach. Looks like I don't have to do anything. This thought just appeared in Gahan's mind. Suddenly, his expression tensed up. He reached out to grab Lu Yunhue's clothes and pulled her into his embrace. Lu Yunhue fell into Gahan's embrace. What are you doing, you pervert? Lu Yunhue thought that Gahan wanted to take advantage of her. Just as she was about to scold Gahan, she suddenly saw the long sword in Gahan's hand stab through the void. A black figure was stabbed out from the void by Gahan. After taking a few steps back, she fell to the ground. This was a very wild and sexy woman. Her body was wrapped in a black tight suit, which outlined her graceful and seductive S-shaped figure. Apart from the dagger in her hand, just looking at her appearance and figure, she was simply a beauty bestowed by the heavens to mankind. This is Yuan Ko. Seeing this woman suddenly appear out of thin air, Lu Yunhue was shocked. At the same time, she understood that Gahan didn't want to take advantage of her. Instead, he saved her life. Otherwise, she would have died under this woman's dagger. Meow. This beautiful Yuan Ko suddenly let out a cat's cry. Then, her body instantly disappeared into the air. Clearly, she had entered stealth mode again. And, as expected, it's a Yuan Ko who can turn invisible. Gahan muttered, hurry up and tell the others to send 1 or 2 sword ladies back. Otherwise, we will all die in the hands of this Yuan Ko. Although the battle just now happened beside them, everyone else was sharing their vision with their sword ladies. Other than Gahan and Lu Yunhue, no one else noticed what happened beside them. Therefore, Lu Yunhue needed to tell the others. Oh, Lu Yunhue hurriedly nodded and loudly told the others that a Yuan Ko with the ability to turn invisible was hiding beside them. What? Lu Yunhue's words shocked the others who were watching the battle. What? Yunhue, did you see wrongly? Or are you playing with us? Li Xiangtian said doubtfully. Shut your mouth. Even if everyone in the team is lying, Yunhue won't lie. Shang Yi scolded Li Xiangtian. Li Xiangtian didn't say anything else. This was because he knew that Shang Yi was telling the truth. Lu Yunhue was indeed the kind of person who would never lie. Zhuozong, Ryu, Chu Hanming, your sword ladies immediately retreat and protect our bodies. And the rest of you, don't share your vision with your sword ladies anymore. Be careful not to get your throats slit by that invisible assassin. Shang Yi was a qualified leader. Under his command, the other members of the team cut off their vision sharing with the sword ladies. They looked around vigilantly, afraid that an assassin would suddenly appear and kill them. However, this vigilance lasted for 3 minutes. During these 3 minutes, nothing happened. The invisible female assassin seemed to have completely disappeared. I say, Yunhue, are you playing with us? Li Xiangtian said to Lu Yunhue with dissatisfaction. However, as soon as he finished speaking, a sharp dagger appeared beside his neck. Idiot! Shang Yi, who was beside Li Xiangtian, immediately pushed Li Xiangtian. However, Li Xiangtian could not avoid the dagger. Li Xiangtian's personal armor shield trembled a few times. It was estimated that at least 60% of the personal armor shield's energy had disappeared. This wasn't even the result of a direct hit. It was just a slight graze from the opponent's dagger. A Flood Dragon Yuan Ko. This is another flood dragon Yuan Ko. Shang Yi instantly broke out in a cold sweat when he saw this. On the battlefield 1 kilometer away, all the sword maidens had expended a great deal of effort to hold back a flood dragon level bandit. However, they had never expected that at this moment, another flood dragon level bandit who could turn invisible would appear beside them. At this time, they had lost the protection of all the sword ladies. When they thought about how their throats could be pierced by a flood dragon Yuan Ko's dagger at any time, everyone immediately shuddered. Li Xiangtian, in particular, had the worst reaction. After losing half of his personal shield, he immediately ordered his sword lady to return to his side to protect him. "What are you doing? Don't let your sword lady return." Shang Yi immediately scolded when he heard Li Xiangtian's order. Shang Yi had already drawn 2 sword ladies back. The battlefield on the other side had changed from an advantageous position to a balanced one. Both sides were just barely helping each other. If Li Xiangtian's sword lady returned, the battlefield on the other side would immediately collapse. "I don't care so much. I don't want to die here." Li Xiangtian was unmoved. He still ordered his sword lady to return. "Not good. That Yuan Ko is aiming at your captain." Gu Han expressionlessly watched this scene and coldly whispered in Lu Yunyue's ear. "What?" Lu Yunyue was shocked when she heard this. She ran away from Gu Han's side without saying anything and shouted, "Captain, be careful." Then, she threw herself onto Shang Ye's body. The two of them fell to the ground together. At the same time, the black figure flashed past Shang Ye's previous position. If it wasn't for Lu Yunyue's timely reaction, Shang Yi would have suffered the same fate as Li Xiangtian. "I remember now. I know who this Yuan Ko is," Gohan suddenly said as he watched everything coldly. "What kind of Yuan Ko is this?" Yu, who was beside Gohan, asked nervously. "They are the flood dragon Yuan Ko's Fantastic Four," Gohan said calmly. Chapter 1066. Fantastic Four. Hearing this name, everyone fell into a deep shock. It was not because of how powerful the name represented, but because the name had a shallow meaning. There were 4 people in the Fantastic Four. Didn't this mean that there were 2 equally powerful Yuan Ko lurking nearby? After the shock, it was followed by despair. Thinking that there were 2 such powerful Flood Dragon level Yuan Ko, as long as these 2 Flood Dragon level Yuan Ko appeared, all the sword bearers present would probably die on the spot. No one would survive. "Melauer! Wake Melauer up!" Suddenly, Li Xiangtian pounced on the medical pod containing the famous sword-level swordsman, desperately pressing all the buttons on the medical pod, trying to find the button to force open and forcibly wake up Melauer, who was in the medical pod. Shang Yi and the others looked at Li Xiangtian's actions with disdain, but they did not stop Li Xiangtian, because at this moment, no one could save them except Melauer. Since Li Xiangtian was willing to be this cowardly idiot, why should they stop him? "It's useless." Unexpectedly, Gohan interjected, "You may have never studied the medical pod. Once the medical pod enters the healing state, it will only open by itself after the treatment is completed. Or, Melauer's authorized friend can open the medical pod by force. Other than that, there is no other way, so don't waste your time." How could this be? Hearing Gohan's words, Li Xiangtian suddenly fell to the ground, lowered his head and murmured, "We're going to die. We're all going to die. We can't live. By the way, there is one more thing I forgot to tell you." Gohan added, "There are 4 good people in the Fantastic Four, but 2 of them died in the hands of a spirit sword level swordsman 100 years ago, and the other 2 were lucky enough to escape, so you don't have to worry about the other 2 Flood Dragon level Yuan Ko hiding nearby." Li Xiangtian, who was lying on the ground, suddenly stood up and looked at Gohan angrily. Why didn't you tell me such an important thing earlier? You made me. If I had told you earlier, how could I have seen such a shameless performance?" Gohan's unceremonious sarcasm made Li Xiangtian even angrier. He rolled up his sleeves, ready to rush to Gohan and beat him up. "Li Xiangtian, that's enough." Captain Shang Yi suddenly roared. "Haven't you embarrassed yourself enough? Now, there's a flood dragon level Yuan Ko lurking around us, and you still want to hurt your comrade? Let me tell you, Li Xiangtian, if you dare to touch comrade Lung Qingxiu, I will leave you in this jungle, and you can walk back to Yuzhong City alone. Shan Ye's anger immediately caused Li Xiangtian to shrink his head again. As one of the only two sword wielders in the team, Shan Ye's words still carried a lot of weight. Li Xiangtian did not dare to disobey Shang Yi. The reason why Shang Yi helped Gahan reprimand Li Xiangtian at this time was not only because he was worried about Yuan Ko, who was still lurking around them, but also because of Guhan's personal terminal. At this time, everyone's personal terminal was damaged. Only Gohan's personal terminal was still intact. In addition to being able to guide the team, it could also scan key information about Yuan Ko. For example, at this moment, if not for Gahan telling them about the Fantastic Four, they would not even know who their opponents were. Comrade Lung Qingxiu, do you know the details of these two Yuan Kos? Do you know what their weaknesses are? Shang Yi immediately asked Gohan after reprimanding Li Xiangtian. Yes. Gohan nodded and said, these two Yuan Kos are called Thunderfire and Invisible Woman. Their abilities are as you can see. One is covered in flames and can shoot flames as a means of attack. The other could control light to make himself invisible. At the same time, he was good at all kinds of close combat. The dagger in his hand was also made of high-tech materials. It was indestructible and had extremely powerful attack power. However, the moment he attacked, he would expose his body. But as soon as she stops attacking, she will immediately go invisible again. Unlike other Yuan Ko who have the ability to go invisible, it takes a long time to go invisible again after leaving the invisible state. As for weaknesses, Thunderfire has two. The first is that he can't fight at full strength for too long in his flame form. And the second is that he is very afraid of water. As long as you find a way to consume his flames and extinguish them with water, he will return to his human form. At that time, he is just an ordinary person and can be easily killed. Invisible Woman's weakness is that she has no other abilities except for close combat and very powerful attack power. At the same time, her body is very fragile. Her defense is not even as good as an ordinary Tiger Yuan Ko. As long as you can attack her, everything will be easy. Gohan said in a few words the characteristics of these two Yuan Kos. P.S. Let me clarify here. According to Marvel's settings, the abilities of Thunderfire and Invisible Woman are far more than this. But according to Marvel's neurotic settings, these two people are sometimes strong enough to destroy the world, and sometimes weak enough to be killed by a child. In short, Marvel's own settings, the author does not like them, so he changed it. Marvel fans, please don't scold me. There will not be too many Marvel Yuan Kos in the future. Thank you. Shang Yi nodded to Gohan to thank him. And then when he was thinking about how to deal with these two Yuan Kos, Su Jun suddenly shouted, "Oh no! That Yuan Ko has left the battlefield and is rushing here." On the other side of the battlefield, there was a major change. The flaming Thunderfire broke free from the other Sword Maiden's entanglement. It's all your fault. Shang Yi glared at Li Xiangtian fiercely. Li Xiangtian lowered his head and did not dare to speak. Obviously, it was because his Sword Maidens left their post and ran back in advance, causing the formation that entangled with Thunderfire to become chaotic, so Thunderfire escaped. We must find a way to solve the danger of this invisible woman before Thunderfire arrives. Shang Yi said quickly. Does anyone have any ideas? Think quickly. The rest of the people immediately fell silent. They knew that Shang Yi was very right. But how could they think of a way to deal with Invisible Woman? Originally, the best way to deal with Yuan Ko, who was invisible, was to use the murderous Path Sword Maiden, who also had the ability to become invisible. However, the problem was that there was no murderous Path Sword Maiden among all the Sword Maidens present, so the whole situation became extremely troublesome. The only person who remained calm was probably Gohan. Invisible Woman did not exist in the eyes of others, but in Gohan's eyes, she was very clear. Gohan saw every move of the Invisible Woman. For example, at this time, The invisible woman had quietly moved to Shang Ye's side, and the dagger in her hand was about to cut Shang Ye's throat. Yunyue, catch this sword. Of course, Gohan could not watch the invisible woman kill Shang Yi. However, he did not want to expose the fact that he could see through the invisible woman's ability, so he suddenly threw the heavenly sword in his hand, which just happened to pass by the invisible woman. The invisible woman was so scared that she immediately took a few steps back, temporarily relieving Shang Yi of the danger. Gohan did not throw the heavenly sword to anyone else. Of course, he threw it to Lu Yunyue, who was standing next to Shang Yi. Lu Yunyue picked up the heavenly sword that Gohan had thrown away from the ground. She looked at Gohan in confusion and asked, "Lord Lung Qingxiu, why did you give me your sword maiden? Isn't your ancient sword rank sword maiden fighting? If you hold my sword maiden in your hand, you will at least have a weapon to resist when facing the invisible woman," Gohan explained with a slight smile. "No, I can't take this." Lu Yunyue immediately ran back to Gohan's side, preparing to return the heavenly sword to Gohan. "Lord Lung Qingxiu, you only have this sword maiden left to protect yourself. If the invisible woman comes to kill you, what will you do?" "I'm fine," Gohan chuckled. The invisible woman's style has always been to kill those who pose the greatest threat first. "I'm just an ordinary person right now. The invisible woman won't kill me first, so it's more important to protect your lives first." But Lu Yunyue was about to continue declining when she suddenly heard Lung Qingxiu say something inexplicable. "Yunyue, didn't you tell me that you learned your family's ancestral sword technique? You can use it now. Who knows, you might be able to defeat the invisible woman." "What ancestral sword technique? Our family has never." Lu Yunyue was about to refute when she suddenly heard Gohan's voice in her mind. She only heard Gohan whisper, "Don't say anything. I'm using the secret sound transmission technique. Only you can hear what I say now. Do whatever I tell you to do later. I guarantee that you can defeat the invisible woman and protect everyone's safety." Lu Yunyue stopped talking. She didn't know why Gohan said that as long as she did what he said, she could defeat the invisible woman. She also didn't know why Gohan had to use the secret sound transmission technique to talk to her and was unwilling to command her openly. However, Gohan must have his reasons for doing so. Lu Yunyue was not stupid enough to go against Gohan's words at this moment. "Walk forward 10 meters and then stab your left back." After Lu Yunyue calmed down a little, she heard Gohan's instructions in her mind. Although she was very confused, Lu Yunyue still followed Gohan's instructions and walked forward 10 meters, and then stabbed her sword to the left back. As a result, something magical happened. Lu Yunyue's sword was clearly stabbing into the void, but Lu Yunyue felt as if she had stabbed something soft. Then a black figure flew out of the void and fell heavily to the ground. The woman looked at Lu Yunyue in disbelief. Obviously, she didn't know how this weak human found her position. Of course, Lu Yunyue didn't know how Gohan found the invisible woman's position. Chapter 1067. The reason why the invisible woman was so powerful was that she was invisible. Unlike other Yuanko or Sword Nyangs, it took a long time for her to be invisible again after getting out of the invisible state. It only took 0.5 seconds to enter the invisible state again, which greatly improved the invisible woman's concealment. Therefore, when the invisible woman was knocked out of the invisible state by Lu Yunyue, she revealed a fierce look and glared at Lu Yunyue. Then, she disappeared again, making Shang Yi, who rushed over to kill the invisible woman, fail. "Yunyue, listen. Now the invisible woman has her eyes on you. You must strictly abide by my every command, otherwise your life will be in danger," Gohan said in Lu Yunyue's ear again, and Lu Yunyue nodded immediately. After the sword attack, just now, she had a deep trust in Gohan's ability. Take 3 steps forward and then stab the side of your left leg with the sword. A few seconds later, Gohan's instructions appeared in Lu Yunyue's mind again, and Lu Yunyue immediately did it without hesitation. The result was naturally imaginable. The invisible woman was beaten out by Lu Yunyue again. Roll back 3 times and stab the back of your right. Run to the tree on the left, and then stab the stump. Squat down immediately and stab the top of your head with the sword. Shang Yi and others looked at Lu Yunyue in front of them, stunned. The terrifying invisible woman had nowhere to hide in front of Lu Yunyue. She would often be found by Lu Yunyue within a few seconds of being invisible, and then she would be stabbed out of the invisible state. No one expected that the person who saved everyone at the critical moment would be the youngest and weakest Lu Yunyue in the team. They didn't expect that Lu Yunyue had the ability to see through the invisible state, and her swordsmanship was so exquisite that it was not inferior to some sword nyongs. The invisible woman, without the invisible ability, was just an ordinary person. After several stabs by Lu Yunyue, all parts of her body were full of bloody wounds. At the same time, she was constantly panting. Even the speed of being invisible again was much slower than before. At this time, the 2 sword maidens that Shang Yi had ordered to return had already returned to the team. Shang Yi immediately said, "You guys quickly cooperate with Yunyue to kill this Yuan Ko." With the cooperation of the 2 sword ladies, the battle became more convenient. As long as Lu Yunyue knocked the invisible woman out of her invisible state, the 2 sword ladies would immediately rush up and slash at the invisible woman. Under the attack of 2 genuine sword ladies, the invisible woman, whose defense ability was exactly the same as that of an ordinary person, was no match for Yuan Ko. Soon, one of his arms was cut off by the sword lady. This time, the invisible woman's face was no longer fierce. Instead, it was full of pain and struggle. She spent a lot of effort to enter the invisible state again. This invisible woman is preparing to escape. Immediately run in the direction of the boulder on your left. When I tell you to strike, immediately stab forward. Understand? Guhan said in Lu Yunyue's ear. Lu Yunyue nodded vigorously and began running according to Guhan's instructions. When she was less than 5 meters away from the boulder, she suddenly heard Guhan shout in her mind. "Do it!" Lu Yunyue stabbed the heavenly sword in her hand forward without hesitation. Then, she heard the sound of a sharp sword entering flesh. The invisible woman's panicked and desperate face appeared in front of Lu Yunyue. However, this time, the invisible woman didn't have the ability to escape. Lu Yunyue's heavenly sword pierced deep into her heart and nailed her to the boulder. "You love?" At the last moment of her life, the invisible woman spat out a few inexplicable words. However, before she could finish speaking, her head turned to the side, and she died. The dimensional vortex immediately appeared above the boulder, completely proving the invisible woman's death. The invisible woman, a WM grade Yuan Ko, had died at the hands of Lu Yunyue, an ancient sword wielder. "I killed her." Seeing the death of the WM grade Yuan Ko and the dimensional vortex that appeared above her head, Lu Yunyue still found it very surreal. She still couldn't believe that she could kill a WRM grade Yuan Ko. "It seems like I haven't killed a WRM grade Yuan Ko in real life when I was at the ancient sword grade." Upon seeing this scene, Guhan smiled and sighed inwardly. After Guhan became an ancient sword wielder, he had only fought a few times in the Miling Mountain Range. The Yuan Ko he had killed were at most Ghost and Soul Yuan Ko. Although Guhan had fought the powerful Medusa and Reina Takasaka in the Miling Mountain Range. One of them was an Ian Yuan Ko, while the other was a mixed-blood Yuan Ko. Neither of them could be considered a WRM grade Yuan Ko. Therefore, Guhan had never killed a WRM grade Yuan Ko in real life when he was at the ancient sword grade. From the looks of it, Guhan had helped Lu Yunyue kill the WRM grade Yuan Ko, making up for the small regret in his heart. Mashiro attack. Don't waste the sword essence in the dimensional vortex. Just as Lu Yunyue was immersed in killing the WRM grade Yuan Ko, Li Xiangtian, who was hiding at the side, immediately ordered his sword lady, who had just escaped from the battlefield. Obviously, Li Xiangtian had his eyes on the sword essence in the dimensional vortex. This was a dimensional vortex that appeared after the death of a WRM-grade Yuan Ko. There were at least 600 to 700 quarks of sword essence in it. If Li Xiangtian's sword lady could absorb the sword essence in this dimensional vortex, he would be able to meet the sword essence requirement of a treasured sword wielder. How could Li Xiangtian not be tempted? Seeing Li Xiangtian's sword lady suddenly run toward the dimensional vortex, the other sword wielders immediately reacted. What was Li Xiangtian trying to do? Immediately, a sword wielder cursed, "Li Xiangtian, you shameless scoundrel." While some were cursing Li Xiangtian, others were learning from him. For example, the Zuozong Ryu sword lady immediately followed behind Li Xiangtian's sword lady and also flew toward the dimensional vortex, preparing to absorb the sword essence in the dimensional vortex. Shameless scoundrel. At some point in time, Gahan had walked to Lu Yunyue's side and used his body to block the two sword ladies who couldn't wait to enter the dimensional vortex to absorb the sword essence. Enough. You two are dignified sword ladies. How dare you do such a shameless thing? Guhan reprimanded the two sword ladies loudly. Don't forget the rules of sword wielders. The dimensional vortex belongs to whoever kills Yuan Ko. This Yuan Ko was killed by Lu Yunyue alone. What right do you have to absorb the sword elements in this dimensional vortex? Lung, get lost. What right do you, a cripple, have to block me? Li Xiangtian immediately turned anxious as he rushed over and said to his sword lady, "Ignore this fellow. Just charge straight over." Li Xiangtian's true white sword nodded and was prepared to flash past Gahan. However, just as she moved to the right, she realized that Gahan had also moved to the right, blocking her path. True White's sword frowned and rapidly charged to the left, preparing to shake off Gahan from the left. However, she never expected that Gahan would be one step faster than her. He still blocked her from the dimensional vortex. Kick this fellow away. Li Xiangtian, who was behind him, grew anxious and prepared to use force on Gahan. However, at that moment, Shang Yi and his sword lady came over and slapped Li Xiangtian in the face. "You piece of trash, get lost. You." Li Xiangtian glared at Shang Yi venomously. As an ancient sword wielder, how could he be a match for a treasure sword wielder? In addition, the other sword wielders looked at him with disdain. Li Xiangtian could only grit his teeth and order his sword lady to return. At that moment, all the sword ladies, including Lu Yunyue's ancient sword lady, had returned. Gahan turned to Lu Yunyue and said, "That's enough. Let your sword lady absorb the sword essence in the dimensional vortex. Otherwise, this dimensional vortex will disappear in a few seconds." "Okay." Lu Yunyue nodded, but she continued, "If not for Lord Ryu and Lord Chu Hanming's help, I wouldn't have been able to kill this sword lady so quickly. Therefore, I hope to share this dimensional vortex with these two Lord Sword Ladies." It was Captain Shang Yi and Su Junjie who held back the other Yuan Ko and protected the safety of this battlefield. "It's impossible for me to kill this Yuan Ko, so I'm willing to share this dimensional vortex with Captain Shang Yi and Su Junjie," Lu Yunyue said again. However, Li Xiangtian's name was not among the names she read. "You killed this Yuan Ko. You can split it however you want. It has nothing to do with me." Gahan walked away after saying that. Then, Lu Yunyue and the other four sword wielders shared the sword essence in the dimensional vortex. I wonder if this girl is really stupid or just pretending to be stupid. Such a thought suddenly surfaced in Gahan's mind as he looked at the smiling Shang Yi, Lu Yunyue, and company. Through a dimensional vortex, Lu Yunyue had successfully made the other sword wielders with combat strength owe her a huge favor. It was worth noting that Lu Yunyue didn't let Li Xiangtian share the dimensional vortex. According to Lu Yunyue, Li Xiangtian's sword lady had also contributed and fought with Thunderflame. However, Lu Yunyue didn't even mention his name. This made Gahan nod inwardly. For a narrow-minded person like Li Xiangtian, as long as you offended him once, he would remember this hatred no matter how well you treated him in the future. Such a person was a jackal that couldn't be fed. Why did she want him to share the sword essence in the dimensional vortex? Was she going to let him deal with her when he was stronger? If Lu Yingyue had allowed Li Xiangtian to share the sword essence in the dimensional vortex like a saint, Gahan would have looked down on Lu Yingyue and wouldn't have helped her like today. By the way, where's Yuan Ko? When all the sword essence in the dimensional vortex was absorbed, the others realized that Thunderflame seemed to have disappeared. He probably fled after discovering that his companions were dead. Shang Yi said indifferently, as long as it was a WIRM or above, Yuan Ko would analyze his situation and escape from dangerous enemies. Therefore, it wasn't strange for him to escape after discovering that his teammates were dead. Just like that, the team once again took a step forward. However, compared to before, Lu Yinyue's status was very different. Although everyone seemed to treat Lu Yinyue well, they actually looked down on her deep down. After all, she was very weak. However, when Lu Yinyue displayed her ability to see through invisibility, Lu Yinyue's position became completely different. Everyone's attitude towards Lu Yinyue was obviously much better. Many times, everyone would take the initiative to ask for Lu Yinyue's opinion. However, Lu Yinyue didn't get complacent because of this. She obviously knew why she was respected. Therefore, in the dead of the night, Lu Yinyue suddenly knelt in front of Gahan and said, Lord Lung Qingxiu, please take Yinyue as your disciple. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.